scheduled board meeting of the Collingswood Board of Education. Appropriate notice has been made for this meeting. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brown is absent. Mr. Craig?
Here.
Mrs. Devine?
Here.
Mrs. Maya?
Here.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Here.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Here.
Mrs. Sherman?
Here.
Mrs. Z?
Here.
Mr. Dokes?
Here.
Mr. Chu?
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. There was no executive session tonight. There are, however, several presentations. So first up, item 3.01 is presentation for Black History Month.
Good evening, everybody. Great to be here tonight. My name is David Oliveri. I'm the supervisor of Humanities K-12. Just wanted to say that we do a lot for Black History Month, particularly in the area of humanities. Lots of literature. Obviously, social studies classes cover all types of topics in Black history, from founding of America to civil rights movement and beyond. I wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that our art classes have been doing lately, though, for Black History Month. Mrs. Slade's class made mannequin sketches based on famous figures in Black history, and Mrs. Bertrand's class had students paint many famous figures in Black history, and Mr. Lamore, who teaches our new AP African American Studies class, had students do blackout poetry. And this is where you take a page of literature, redact certain words, and map it out so it equals a poem when you read the words that are not redacted. Some of the students that were listed as exemplars I have right here, and if you are here tonight and you want to be recognized, please stand up because you did a wonderful job. From Mr. Lamore's class, we have Cassidy Moore. Khadija Fafana. Graham Reynolds. And for Miss Bertrand's class, Keelan Boyler. Sophia Medina Ramos. Rory Burris. And for Miss Slade's class, Nora Maxwell. Ayana Nichols. Blair Busniak. Daniel Morales. Cleo Fisher. Darnell Montague. Layla Pratt. And Silena Daniel. Again, wonderful job, and I encourage everybody here, please take a look at some point. I'll leave them up throughout the night, and I won't pick them up till tomorrow morning. So after the meeting, if you want to take a peek, please do. Students, thank you again. Very memorable month. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliveri. I think on behalf of the Board of Education, I think I can pretty confidently say that we're really excited to get a chance to look at the presentation after the board meeting. I'm looking forward to being able to look at each one of them individually. So congratulations. Thank you so much, students, for your amazing work. Moving on to 3.02. This is a recognition for Eagle Scout for Xander Stutzman.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. And so the Collingswood Board of Education would like to recognize former student Xander Stutzman of Oak Lynn at its meeting this evening for achieving the prestigious rank of Eagle Scout in Troop 3179. Xander began his scouting journey in 2017, earning his first merit badge in fingerprinting. Over the years, he demonstrated commitment and leadership, progressing through the ranks and attending summer camps at the Roosevelt Scout Reservation. His dedication led him to earn the ranks of Tenderfoot in 2019, second class in 2021, and first class later that same year. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, Xander remained actively engaged in scouting, participating in an adventure at Yawgoog Scout Reservation and serving as senior patrol leader. His leadership skills flourished as he was elected senior patrol leader for the 22-23 term. He earned the rank of Star Scout in October of 2022, Life Scout in June of 2023, and joined the summer camp staff, where he was recognized for a strong work ethic and commitment to service. During his senior year at Collingswood High School, Xander took on the role of Junior Assistant Scoutmaster while completing his Eagle Scout requirements. For his project, he led the planning and construction of a Gaga pit at the Oakland VFW Park in June of 2024. Following high school graduation, he returned to work at Camp Yawgoog before completing his Eagle Board of Review on January 2nd, 2025, officially earning the rank of Eagle Scout. We commend Xander for his dedication to scouting, leadership, and service to his community. His achievements exemplify the values of hard work, perseverance, and civic engagement. Currently, Xander is studying pre-med neuroscience at Ramapo College, and he plans to continue serving and scouting as a member of summer camp this year. Can we please give a round of applause as Xander joins me on the stage? Xander, thank you again for your service and your leadership in our community.
Congratulations, Xander, on your achievement. Moving on to item 3.03, the SSDS report for period 1 by Mr. Jefferson.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight we're going to take a look at some of our school safety data system report. Denotatively, the dictionary definition, if you were to look on the Department of Education website, the definition that you're going to see is the New Jersey Department of Education Student Safety Data System is a system that collects information about incidents in schools. The SSDS is used to meet state and federal reporting requirements. Connotatively, right, what's the more implied meaning is that these quantitative figures and numbers and data are really used so that as school districts, we can take a look at what are some of the things that we're doing to help ensure safety, to help that students are getting some of the help that they need as far in relation to conflicts and things of that nature. And so that's kind of also the connotative meaning to what is the SSDS system. So if we're looking at the numbers this year is going to be considered the first period, which would be from September to December. The numbers that you're going to see in red are going to be the numbers from this year. I do have the numbers in blue that will show you for the first period last school year. what the numbers were in comparison. So HIB, harassment, intimidation, and bullying investigations, this year, this is throughout the total district, there were 15 total investigations. If you compare that to last year this time, there were 24. There were 11 alleged that did not meet the definition of a HIB according to state standards. There were 4 confirmed that met the definition of a HIB after a investigation was conducted. Furthermore, we're talking about removals. A removal is any incident that would be considered removing a student from the learning environment, whether that is out of school suspension or whether that is some type of in-house suspension or alternative location other than what a child's normal schedule is. So in the first period, there were 42 removals in comparison in the district last year to 78. Restraints are self-explanatory. Last year in the second period, there were 5, in the second period being last spring. This year in the first period, we had 4 restraints. Down at the bottom, it gets into more of the specifics. There are really 4 areas that are looked at and focused on when we're talking about the student safety SSDS system. First is violence, and violence would be anything in which usually physical altercation, whether that's between 2 students or whether that is someone who put their hand on someone else or did something that fell into the category of violence against another person. Of course, vandalism, we had 14 of those. Vandalism is going to be 2. Weapons is going to be 2. And then substance is going to be 7. I have confirmed there because with substance it's going to be if someone was found to be in possession of an illegal substance or found to be under the influence. Now, how do you know if someone is under the influence? That would be if they were sent out for testing and the test came back confirmed, okay? So that would not be if we were just leaning on our own understanding and possibly thought that someone was under the influence, then, and if you don't have any evidence of that, either seeing them with the possession or getting a report back from a test from an outside entity that was able to test the student, then you wouldn't be able to put that under confirmed. Okay. Board members, any questions that anyone may have?
Not a question, but an appreciation for putting in the totals from the previous year. I think that's something that we had been requesting for some time. It helps with giving just some context to these numbers,
Yes.
and good to see, particularly when you look at something like removals. Anything that you might be able to say around why such a big jump there?
Well,
or drop?
well, what is the main thing for removals, especially when we're looking at our restorative practices, when you do get a situation where someone has put their hands on someone, it's very difficult to, in a lot of cases, to not remove someone. I will tell you that the amount of physical altercations has dramatically decreased. One of the things that I would really say is we've been working strongly on developing a culture that says to students, talk to someone. Unfortunately, I can tell you about one physical altercation in which we had a student that when I sat down to meet with them, they gave me 2 examples of when they went to look for an adult and couldn't find the adult and happened to bump into the individual that they were having the conflict with. Also, mediations. Mediations has been really big with mediating students who have a concern. I think I said this in one meeting prior to this. We're actually at a point now where we're getting kids who are coming to administrators, coming to teachers and saying, can you go get so-and-so and can we sit down and talk? In the past, students unfortunately thought that, and a lot of students still do, when I'm upset with someone, that we have the maturity and the discipline to discuss this in the hallway, right? We can solve this altercation while we're very angry by ourselves. Most students don't intend on there being a physical conflict when they approach someone. But with really working with the restorative and having conversations with students, we're finally getting, part of my back, everyone, we're finally getting them to understand is that you're not disciplined enough, in most cases, children, to iron out a conflict when you're that angry by yourselves. So adult help is definitely needed. So I would definitely say that the thesis behind some of the restorative is students seeking out adults, whether it's teachers, it's not always administrators, teachers, also administrators, also some of the culture and climate staff. We have a culture and climate staff that we have working in the hallways and with students that have just been amazing. I mean, some of the students, I can't tell you how good they have been, and even that culture and climate staff will sometimes come to us and say, hey, just wanted to drop a little something in your ear. And that's tough for them because a lot of kids confide in them, but also the culture and climate staff, they have to use their own discretion with sometimes respecting children and when children come to them, but also using their discretion when they think it's something that needs to be shared with a staff member. So I definitely think that the restorative practices, in specific, the mediation of conflicts and beginning to implement the paradigm shift is students believing and understanding that sitting down and talking with someone or you allowing a staff member to lead a conversation. And sometimes it's difficult, right? Sometimes it's you have students that still aren't good at it, and it becomes a shouting match sometimes, but it's working. It's working.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson, for that presentation. We're now going to enter Committee of the Whole. Can I get a motion for entering Committee of the Whole?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Awesome. So during Committee of the Whole, we're going to focus on the budget and a budget update. We have a presentation over here, which I think we're going to cycle through. It's going to be Ms. Coleman, Dr. McDowell, and myself talking through the budget update. And so I guess we'll take it away.
You want to do it or? I'm going to blow through this slide. This is our, our mission statement, our district leadership. Next one, Roger. Next one, I'm sorry. Doesn't want to work. And again, how do we go about doing the budgets? You probably heard me say this before, but the board starts with their mission and their goals. The whole part being student achievement, as we know, and I'm sorry, Fred, can you move forward a little bit? This isn't working, me doing it sitting down. And then our school budgets and budget development, and this presentation is just, we started out at the board retreat in the beginning of February. I did this in the retreat and just giving you an update of where we are right now and how we got there, knowing that state aid is coming out on Thursday. Next slide, yeah.
So in order for us to be able to understand how did we get here, it's important for us to go back and remind ourselves of where we have been. And so I'm going to speak specifically to 2021. February of 2021, I had the pleasure of coming on as superintendent of Collingswood and Oakland Public Schools, and I took the first several months in order to do a deep dive into all aspects and areas of the school district, budget, finance, and operations being one of them. We released in May of 2021 a comprehensive transition report where this was the first introduction of what we call the triple squeeze. And so the triple squeeze, in its most simplest terms, basically states is that there are three core components that are contributing to the financial challenges within Collingswood. First, it's a higher degree of expectations and accountability. Second, increased cost to operate due to inflation. And then the third is either a lack of student enrollment, which could be in decline, or a inability to increase revenues to keep up with said costs. And so we talked about the triple squeeze, and then specifically we talked about what we were going to do in order to mitigate that challenge to the degree possible. Move us to 22-23. We started to see post-pandemic inflationary costs that began late 2020 to 2021 and really began to emerge in 21-22 and hit us extremely hard in 22-23, where we saw the first beginnings of programmatic reductions in our budget. 23-24, we began to see program and staffing reductions due to the structural deficit, all along the way advocating both at the county and at the state level and at the borough level to be able to talk about what the structural challenge was, and that if we didn't solve this problem together, we would have a challenge in the delivery or continuity of services and support to students and staff. Move us to 24-25. Significant programmatic and staffing reductions due to a structural deficit, which you will see a little bit later today. Move us to current state. We currently have unsustainable inflationary costs year over year, and the revenues simply are not available. And so I want to be extremely clear in what I'm getting ready to say, is without additional, and I mean significant additional revenues, there will be, quote unquote, significant, painful reductions to programs and staffing in Collingswood. And so the advocacy and the work that has been done by community members, the work that has been done by our borough, the work that has been done by our board, this is what a democracy looks like. Folks coming together, trying to solve problems. I'm confident that working together, we will be able to close this loop and hopefully avoid crippling budgetary reductions, which would not be what our area of focus is, in order to provide beyond what is called a thorough and efficient public education in New Jersey. And so what's the challenge? And so when we look at 23-24, the increased cost to maintain existing services increased by $3.4 million. Additional revenues to address those inflationary costs was 1.6. We were able to close that gap leveraging the grant dollars and additional resources that we were able to go out and find. And so over the last 3 years, our school district with teachers and administrators have helped us to secure over $7 million in additional grant funding in order to offset this structural challenge to the degree possible. In 24-25, increased costs were $4 million. Revenues were $1.2 million. Half of that deficit, we were able to leverage the last remaining grant dollars. We had to sustain a $1.4 million reduction. That came in the form of 21 staff positions that we were unfortunately unable to fund that particular year. Move us to 25-26. The estimated, and we say estimated because we have yet to receive our budget, but the anticipated inflationary cost are $3.8 million to maintain current levels of service, and the anticipated revenues is roughly $1.1 million, barring any reductions from federal aid or any reductions from state aid, which are yet to be determined. We will receive state aid numbers on Thursday. The governor has his state budget address tomorrow afternoon, and by state law, he has 48 hours in order to actually release state aid. And so we will know what we know Thursday. So you want to take over? Okay. And so there's two main guiding questions when it comes to how do we align resources to the budget. Former President Joe Biden once said is that if you want to see what we value, see what's in our budget. Couldn't agree more. And so the guiding questions are, how do curriculum instruction and programmatic development impact student achievement? And the second guiding question is how do we improve the efficiency of our operations to also impact student achievement? And so what this means in its most simplest term, how do you provide a continuity of service in the most effective and the most efficient way to make sure that students get what they need?
All right, my turn to take over. So what does that mean? All the schools submitted their budgets. So when we went through, we look at everything. We look at personnel, we look at all curricular, co-curricular activities, staff positions, trying to maximize achievement. We look at all areas of operations to identify any efficiencies we can, which is why a lot of this, just about everybody in the board office, including child site team and buildings and grounds, we all serve 2 school districts. This way we can generate a little additional revenue. And we continue to explore shared service agreements when we can and when it makes sense. And I say when it makes sense so that our buildings and grounds team is not, they're not overburdened with doing additional. Every year we do the school budget planning calendar. This is actually a requirement in CUSAC for those of you that know what CUSAC is. But I usually give it to the board in the fall. People always say, oh, you do the budget once a year. No, I usually have, at any point in time, I've got 3 budgets that I'm dealing with. If anybody who's heard me say this before, I'm closing out last year, working in this year, and planning for next year, which is why every month there's some sort of budget activity on the administrative staff calendar. And we talk about it in the admin meetings, and any of the admins in the room will agree. They start early on their budgets, and they do that on purpose because we need as much time as we possibly can at the board office. And we know this, our revenues have to equal our expenses. And Fred has said this before, we get revenue in about 5 different places. State aid has been, it's basically been flat. Federal aid, our local taxes, tuition, and any miscellaneous income I can bring in from shared service. Expenses, biggest ones are salaries and benefits, obviously our supplies, our curriculum, materials, our special ed, out-of-district tuition, and transportation, and utilities. So all that, as you know, with your home budgets, has to balance. So what do I know as of right now? So by law, everybody knows, you've heard me scream and yell, we're limited to a maximum of a 2% tax increase without any kind of adjustment. That 2% is about $375,000. We are eligible for a healthcare adjustment because as of right now, our healthcare renewal is coming in at 7%, which is great because I started out at 10, but then prescription is at 20. State health benefit plan prescriptions coming in at 29, so we are better than the state plan, but the prescription drug plans are just, everybody's renewals are ridiculously high this year. So we will be generating a healthcare adjustment. And if anybody's been reading the papers, everybody who's got PSE and G Atlantic City Electric or any of the companies starting July 1, even your home, everybody's getting a 20% increase in their utilities starting in July 1. So all that's been factored into the budget as of right now. So our costs are up about $1.8 million. I do have a loss in tuition revenue, about $1.26 million over last year, and that comes from a few things. Number one is the cost per pupil went down, so we charged our sending districts more money than it actually cost, probably because we've been cutting and then we've been trying to defer some of, or move some of our expenses to the federal funds, so it's reduced our overall cost per pupil. So we owe Oakland and Woodland money back. In addition, last year, the opposite happened. So in last year's tuition revenue, we were actually getting additional monies back as a tuition adjustment. And then there's a decrease in children coming to the high school from Woodland. So that as overall, the tuition revenue, you'll see a decline of about $1.2 million on my spreadsheet that I'll show you in a second. As of right now, I'm assuming flat state aid, but we did get a memo from the commissioner last week, basically hinting or warning of a possibility of a 3% decrease, or basically saying and the way they word it is very difficult, but they said, no school district should see more than a 3% decrease. So they're limiting any cuts to school districts at 3%. So I don't, and again, there are going to be some school districts that are entitled to more money that are, I'm assuming they're going to be limited on the other end. And then currently in the budget is the fix to the Irvine gym entrance, but that is coming out of a withdrawal from our capital reserve fund so that we can get that done.
Beth, Ann, mind if I jump in here?
Sure.
The memo from the state about the 3% cap in loss in state aid was on just a few of the main categories of state aid that the state provides districts. And so they specifically stated that there are a few other categories of state aid that are connected, say, with enrollment numbers that is not capped by that 3% loss. So in fact, districts can overall lose more than 3% of their state aid next year, but the main categories are capped at 3% loss.
And I know this is a very hard to read spreadsheet, so this presentation will be on the website tomorrow. So this is the last 4 years, basically, of my revenue. So I can kind of give you a little picture. So in the upper right column, you'll see that's my tuition revenue. It is going down by the $1.2 million that I previously said. And on the bottom, you will see the upside down of about $3 million. I know we've been talking $3 million, but that's where that number comes from. So this is all of the tuition for the last 4 years. The spreadsheet actually is much larger. It goes back to like 2008, but I had to condense it. So it really does tell a story when you go back that far. So all I do is I do our revenues, and then on the last line on the bottom, I put in what the total expenses are, and that's just nothing more of a process of me going into the budget software. Basically, everything I've put in, and the business office has put in, and the schools put in, and look at what the total is and compare it to my revenues. It's a very simple process, but you could see where we are upside down by $3 million. Next slide. And then this was actually a good idea. Thank you, Zakiya. I know you've heard us talk about we're under adequacy, below adequacy, local fair share. So this is a page out of the 24-25 school district budget. And it shows what our total adequacy budget should be, or Trenton considers us what should be, versus what we are, meaning our general fund tax levy and plus our equalization aid. They compare those two numbers. We're upside down by $3.6 million under adequacy. And then the next slide, again, this will be on the website, but this is a page out of our state school aid file that I get. So I'll be getting an updated file on Thursday. But this shows the local fair share for Collingswood versus our tax levy. So the local fair share for Collingswood is about $24 million according to Trenton. This is for last school year, 24-25 budget, versus our tax levy of $18 million. So when you hear us say we're upside down by $5 million, this is where the $5 million comes from. Then you hear us say upside down by $3 million, you know where the $3 million is coming from. But I wanted just to give you an idea. These are actual state documents, and these are actually real documents. Go ahead, next one, thanks. Go ahead, Roger.
So to expand on what Ms. Coleman just talked about, I basically made this graph from several years of those exact documents that Beth Ann was talking about. And so what you see here, and this I think is really helpful for us to understand where the district's been and where it's going, and why I think I've heard oftentimes the question of, well, why is this just an issue now? Why wasn't this an issue, back when I went to school or back when? And when we look at this graph, the yellow line at the very top, that is the local fair share. And so that is how much money the state has determined that our community can support through looking at the property values and looking at local income and looking at our enrollment, how much money our local town can support in terms of funding our schools. The blue line, second from the top, is our local tax levies. So that is how much money that we as a district are allowed to bring in tax revenue every year. And so if you can see, that blue line is growing just slightly every single year, so we have kind of this upward little slope going on. And that's reflective of basically that 2% cap, right? We can't just jack up how much taxes we get every single year because we're limited by the state. And what we'll see here is how much the local fair share has grown, how much the state has calculated that we can pay as a community to provide education for our students, how that has grown over the years. And if you see that little pink sort of up and down arrow, gap in funding, the distance between the yellow and the blue line is the gap in our funding. Because even though the state says, hey, we can pay this much, which yellow line, us as a community, we are only putting in that much, which is the blue line. And that's all that the district can ask for. This is, I think, really important to notice because pre-pandemic, we can see that that gap, it always existed, but it was pretty small. And as we get to the pandemic and more recently, we can see that the growth in that local fair share is getting larger and larger. But we as a school district, because of laws, cannot increase our taxes at that same rate because of the 2% cap law. The growth in local fair share is important too because what it's based upon is the calculations of what the state views as the budget that we as a district need to be able to provide an adequate education for all of our students. And that local fair share, right, so they have this adequacy budget which says this is how much money you need total to give adequate education to all of your students. Well, if this is how much you can give in your local fair share, whatever is the remaining amount is your state aid. That's essentially what they say. So as our local fair share grows, our state aid should be decreasing. The problem is that our tax revenue is not keeping up with that local fair share. And in fact, if you look at our state aid, which is the red line, it's basically stayed flat for the last 10 years. So even while the cost of educating our kids has grown, even while our local tax levy has only grown slightly, our state aid has stayed flat. And in fact, if you do the calculations, we're getting about $2 million of extra state aid this year that technically by their formula, we shouldn't be getting. And so that's why our current adequacy budget gap is only about $3 million rather than the $5 million that gap is at the end. I also want to mention the last line, which is the green line, is the amount of excess surplus that was available to the district at the beginning of that school year. So basically that's the money that was saved in previous years that was rolled over, available for the district to use to buffer costs. And what we see here is that as the gap grows and as the pandemic hit, our district had to use all of the excess surplus. And so any excess surplus that was there before that could buffer the gap from before is no longer there because we had to use it up to buffer the increased costs during the pandemic and to buffer the increase in a local fair share and that gap in funding. And so that's where we are now, where we have a growing local fair share where we cannot close that gap because of laws surrounding how we can raise taxes. Our state funding is luckily staying flat so far, but we don't really have any surplus because we've had to use it up in the previous years to make up that gap as best as possible.
I'm not going to go through this, you've seen this before, but these are just a lot of the cost-saving measures that we, I don't want to say do, but we do. Again, we do a lot of co-op purchasing, a lot of shared services for trash removal with Oakland. We're in GIFs, and those GIFs, of course, last year, and I don't think we're getting refunds this year, but usually if you pay in with your premium, after it's audited and it's all not spent, you get it back in the form of a rebate. We haven't seen a rebate in a couple of years. But these are all things we do to try to bring money back into the district. Next one. And again, I've gone through this before. This is just all the ways we've done some creative revenues. Again, we do a lot of shared services. At every shared service agreement that I put out on the street, I do put a small fee in there so that we're bringing money back into Collingswood every time we're sending somebody out to help another district. And we do see, in addition to Oakland and Woodland, we do have about a dozen other children coming into Collingswood from other districts to participate in our outstanding special ed programs in some of the schools. What we don't know. The governor's going to speak tomorrow afternoon. The link is on here if anybody's so inclined to watch it. What I also don't know is what's going to happen in Washington. I think that's probably after we get through March and April, that's probably going to be another thing that's probably going to cause more gray hair on my head, is just what's going to happen with the Department of Education in Washington. Like I've said before, I have dollars set aside for all 3 units going into the next school year. And again, what I don't know is between now and June, my ability to squeeze a little money out of this year's budget to put back as surplus if we have any additional out-of-district placements that pop up, and they do pop up pretty frequently. And again, depending what happens with our $3 million upside down, I call it the upside down, and what happens with any state aid or lack thereof regarding the state and federal, we're going to have some program and personnel impacts that are going to have to be felt. Next one. Go ahead, Roger. This is yours.
So this was a slide that we presented during the February 10th meeting, and this is the same slide as previously that Dr. McDowell presented, which shows the increase in cost of revenue over the last 3 years, or last 2 years, and then next year, our estimated growth in costs, expenses, and then estimated growth in revenue. And you can see basically, because the blue bar is so much bigger than the orange bar, basically what that says is our costs are increasing faster than we can bring in revenue. Remember, our tax revenue is capped, our ability to increase tax revenue is capped at 2%, barring a few exceptions like the healthcare exception that Ms. Coleman spoke about earlier. And so, as a reminder, we've had to cut programming and also cut line items within our budget in the 23-24 school year. Last year, in order to make it into this year, we had to cut many line items, and also in order to close the remaining $1.4 million hole, part ways with 21 teachers, staff, administrators. So this year, this is the problem that we're facing, is we're facing this massive gap where our budget is very bare bones. We don't have that many places to be able to cut that does not directly impact students. And so one of the things that we have to look through is how do we maintain a balanced budget, which is required by law, right? Given that our revenues are capped and our expenses keep on growing. And that's part of the major process that the board office will be going through in the next couple of months. So that, I believe, is the end of the presentation.
And I just wanted to end by saying this isn't a Collingswood-specific problem. I've been in contact with the neighboring districts right around here, the Haddon Propers, I guess you want to call it, everybody around this area. It's no surprise to me that we're basically all upside down by about the same dollar amount, because we're all similarly sized districts. We all have like basically the same average salary increase. We're all seeing the same increases in health care. So we're all, some are better than others, but we're all struggling with the upside down. I went for a BA meeting last week, and I sat with like all of my neighboring BAs in this area, and we are all upside down. And that's really not a surprise to me, because the state hasn't been very generous with suburban school districts with state aid, and we've been holding it together with our surplus. But again, once it's gone, it's gone, and it's gone. And we're all struggling with the same runaway costs that there's just no capping on. So I just wanted to end with that. I mean, I know this is like doom and gloom, and I'm Debbie Downer, but this is not Collingswood specific. This is every district in our surrounding area, and there's probably more across the state, but I'm only concerned with our little area right here, and we're all having the same problem right now.
Right, and this is, because this is something that's facing a lot of districts within the state, this is another reason that Dr. Seltzer, Ms. Sherman and I went to the state, the School Funding Reform Act meeting held by the Department of Education back in January to get a chance to talk to and advocate specifically to state policymakers about updating the school funding formula and the ways in which they fund schools to help us close these gaps. Ms. Sherman, do you mind also talking about the meeting that you went to last week?
I attended a meeting with the New Jersey Fair Funding Collective. It's actually spearheaded by our neighbors in Haddon Township, by the board president there, Kelly Hinkle, who's done a lot of work with this and a lot of research and a lot of advocacy. And, not to, belabor the point, but every single district that was there, mostly Camden County, but not all Camden County. There was Lumberton, there was someone from Mount Laurel there. There was even someone from Lenape, but I sat and spoke at length with Haddonfield's Superintendent Chuck Kloss, Haddon Township's Dr. Fisicaro, and the conversations that they're having are the exact same ones that we are having here. They are all deeply concerned about the sustainability of our school districts. Many of them said that they felt a lot of pressure to regionalize. We are a smaller district than some of the ones up north and some in central Jersey. And many of them felt that this was pressure from the state to regionalize and combine to make larger school districts. They were very hesitant to do so. We did speak with one assemblyman, Cody Miller, who is from District 4, right next door to us in Gloucester, who talked about the best place to advocate is, in addition to the Department of Education, the General Assembly and the legislators here, because those are the ones who actually are making the funding formula. Those are the ones who have the ability to change it at a level that the Department of Education just kind of churns it out. But all of them, and it was surprising to hear, a number of these districts talk at this length, and the fact that this was unsustainable, just to repeat what Dr. McDowell was saying, seemed to be something that they were all reiterating. Some of them talked about their relationships with their municipalities, particularly the use of pilot programs to help support school districts. Many of them said that they felt frustrated with their municipalities in their hesitancy to commit some of that pilot money. All of them talked at length about the 2% cap, especially since the county average for teacher salary increases is 3.5%, so the math just does not line up. There's a number of districts around the state that are still in negotiations with their teachers. Mount Laurel does not have a contract, Bordentown does not have a contract, and largely it's because of this inability to meet that 3.5% effectively. And so there are a number of other ideas, but I think that the biggest thing that came from this is there's going to be a lot more pressure from districts on legislators and assemblymen and women to start having these conversations at the local level as well.
No, I'll add on, I was actually reading a few articles earlier today, and it shows how this is unfortunately such a statewide issue. So I was reading chalkbeat.org, and they had an article on January 23rd, 2025, talking about the South Brunswick school system, and there they said the South Brunswick Superintendent Scott Fader said, if we stay flat, so no new state aid, no new federal funding, nothing else, and we maximize the tax levy impact, most districts will be down somewhere between 2 and 4% of their operating budgets for the next school year. And in that article, he first says South Brunswick District will be down by about $3 million in the next school year's budget if all funding remains flat, Fader said. The loss could be as great as $8 million if federal funding is cut. And so I think this is the fiscal reality that we're unfortunately having to deal with right now within South Jersey and within our town. And I think one of the challenges for us will definitely be to figure out how best to navigate this coming budget cycle. Are there any, I guess, questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, so it looks like this deficit has been anticipated. So my question is, why did this board not present a referendum for operational costs instead of capital investments? And we can say that capital investments might help in 5 years, but they're not going to help with the $3 million deficit that we have coming into next year. And we still would have had to let teachers go and programs cut, and our taxes would still be increased. So the fiscal irresponsibility is concerning of why that was a priority and not the operational costs.
Yeah, so so that I think is a very interesting question, because that relies on this assumption that we can go out to referendum to increase our operating budget, and that is not a given. So last year, Robbinsville district in New Jersey went out for a referendum to increase their operating budget. They found a loophole in the law that no other district or seems like the Department of Education believes should be there. Because when you go out for a referendum to increase your budget, the state and the law says that a district may not include the following types of programs or services in a separate proposal at special election. Programs and services required to meet the New Jersey student learning standards. Capital outlay projects necessary for health and safety. Programs and services previously included in the pre-budget year, except with approval by the county executive superintendent. So basically, what we're saying is that this is not something that the Department of Education intends, or the law intends, for us to be able to do. And so while Robbinsville did it, you'll notice that not any other school districts are doing it, because what we're waiting on is to see from the Department of Education what their reaction will be to Robbinsville having found this and used this loophole this year when they release the state's state funding information. You know, that's one of the big fears that we've had and that we actually discussed on the board, which is if we were to do this and use this loophole, would the state claw back funding from us because we circumvented their laws? We're not sure. The county superintendent, the state Department of Education, from my understanding, they will not answer Ms. Coleman when she's asked about this. And so that's one of the big pieces that we have to understand, is that there's this assumption that we can just go out and raise money for our budget just willy-nilly, and we cannot. Now, beyond that, I do want to mention that the referendum, I think it keeps on being brought up, you know, regardless of whether or not you agree with the plan or not, school building consolidation is a proven way in which to help costs and maintain costs and lower structural deficits that we have within this district. We see it in so many different places within the state. I mean, Jackson School District is talking about closing their middle school, as reported in January 2025, to consolidate buildings to save costs. Jefferson Township reported in 2024 closing an elementary school to save costs. Washington Hills Regional, Central Regional, Walk Hill Regional, Holland Township, Logan Township were all awarded grants by the state to explore consolidation, because the consolidation of buildings is a surefire way to help reduce overhead costs. If we had the ability to consolidate buildings, if we had the ability then to also, say, sell Garfield as was planned in the referendum, that would have given us some level of stopgap ability and flexibility that we have none of now. That could have potentially helped us get to a stopgap situation where we can look at when our current debt rolls off in 2030 or 2031. But again, we have none of that flexibility now. And so, as I understand that folks are wondering, well, why didn't we go out for a referendum to up our operating budget instead of go out for a bond referendum to help our capital improvements? Well, because one, we don't know that if we could, and two, because our capital improvements are important. At this point now, because we have no flexibility, if the roof fails on one of our 100-year-old plus buildings, that money comes out of our operating budget. There is no money hidden anywhere that directly comes out of the money that must be used to educate our students. When I say there's no flexibility now, that's what I mean. That is the danger that we are facing, and that's something that this board made very clear. You know, this is also something that the current budget shortfall, yes, it has been anticipated. And this board has been, and this district have been doing work to address this for years now. As Dr. Morales said, in his May 2021 90-day entry plan summary, which is available on the district website, on page 14, he writes specifically, as a school community, we must confront the triple squeeze, unsustainable cost structures that increase automatically and take funds away from improving instructions, like deferred building maintenance, special education, placements, cost of benefits. 2, higher bar for student learning and greater student needs, which require new strategies and new investments. And 3, flat or decreasing revenue, declining local, state, and federal funding, decreased enrollment. This was in May 2021 that Dr. Mal let our community let us know about this. In March 28th, 2022, we had a 4-hour board meeting to discuss the updated budgeting process, right, which was put in place, as reported by the retrospect, quote by what Dr. McDowell said, make sure that every available dollar based on level of funding reaches the students. And this budgeting process helped the district identify pockets of inefficiency. Right? This was reported in April 2022. Right? Now, I went back and looked at this meeting because it was a 4-hour meeting with public comments. And this budget process, right, that 4-hour meeting, we had many public comments, many of them very negative about this process. And one of the comments I kind of want to bring up that I looked through, one of the community members said, you know, I am also kind of concerned that we're talking about scarcity in a time of plenty. We started the meeting saying we have $1.6 million surplus, and now we're talking about scarcity. That was the reaction that our superintendent, our district got when we were attempting to address the forthcoming budget deficit. And so when we look, I just want to be very clear. Yes, in 21-22, we had a $1.6 million surplus, but we knew that local fair share would be growing. We knew that the structural budget deficit was there. And we were addressing this issue, even though it is a hard issue to address when we start the year with $1.6 million worth of surplus. So this has been something that we have addressed for years. We've gotten grant funding to bring in, to increase our school budget, to increase services for our kids. At the same time, we've heard that grant funding isn't appropriate to fund staff because it's not permanent. In the May 8th, 2023 budget meeting, or sorry, 2023 budget meeting, so the next year's budget meeting, we had to cut freshman sports teams. We had to reduce line item budgets. We also increased grant revenue. And crucially, we didn't hire to fill retired and vacant teacher positions that were not educationally needed because we had those classes covered. And at the same time, we were told by some folks in the public that our actions were reprehensible. We didn't renew the school liaison officer when he left, and that directly saved a student-facing position this current school year. Right. In this current school year, we have 20 administrators total. While in 2018-2019, we have 23 administrators total. So we've even decreased our administration to save costs. I say all this to say that this structural deficit has been an issue that this board and this district have been addressing for years, that our superintendent has been addressing for years, even when it's been hard to, even when it's been difficult to, when folks tell us that it is the wrong thing to do. So I just want to make that clear when we say, hey, we have this coming gap. The reason why we passed this resolution last board meeting to ask for additional funding from the borough is because we have no other choice. We have no other choice at this point other than to lose services and programming for our students. We need a structural change, and that's really important for us to keep in mind.
So, Roger, I want to be mindful of the people that are here and their time, and move on to public comment as soon as we can. But I wanted to get a sense of, I know, Sarah, you mentioned that there is some pressure to regionalize, right? Amongst other districts are feeling that pressure too. Have there been any discussions about regionalization? Because we can only put so much of a burden on our community in terms of funding our school districts. And I think it would be helpful to break down the local fair share versus the local tax levy, because I feel like those numbers are very difficult for people to understand in general, you know, including myself, in terms of how that happens, in terms of what the state determines what our local fair share is and why we're not necessarily getting that, and we're only able to increase our taxes by 2%. The numbers are just, I mean, you know, they don't add up, but to us, to try to understand that is really complex, because we're not budget people. So I guess my first question is, has there been any talk of regionalizing, and what does that look like? And my second question is to address those two things.
I haven't heard any discussions about regionalization. I do know in the accountability regulations, and I'm not 100% accurate, about 90%, I believe it's the job of the county superintendent to identify those districts that they recommend for possible regionalization, and they're supposed to set up the meetings and do a report and all that, and to my knowledge, that hasn't happened, and nobody's reached out to us on that. And as far as local fair share, in its simplest sense, local fair share is what Trenton thinks you should be paying. It's based on your tax base in town, right? It's based on, I guess, the income of your citizens and your property values, and they get all that from the Treasury and the Department of Community Affairs. Like they dump all that data and they say, Collingswood, this is what you should be paying. That's your local fair share. It in no way is realistic to what any school district in the state of New Jersey receives. But they use that number against you in the state funding formula, right? They back everything out of that number, and what's left is what you get in state aid. It's asinine, but it's just just how they do it. Our tax levy is about the 18 point whatever million dollars. So that's actually what you pay. And the difference is what we can't, I would love to be able to reach, because we could solve all of our problems and it would just be wonderful. But with a 2% property tax cap, thanks to Governor Christie, although it's great, our property taxes have been pretty stable in the state of New Jersey. I can never catch that local fair share, and every year when they do the state aid announcement and they send out the printouts, that number's ever increasing, because as you know, like, stuff never goes down, it just always goes up. So I can't chase it. At this point, like, we are never gonna catch that number. So that's kind of where the numbers, what they mean.
So I guess I'm gonna say, rather than ask folks for more, can we have a budget that is not balanced so we can get what they're expecting? Because I think there's a certain point where we need to show our hand. We have squirreled, we have balanced, we have moved, we're using grants from a government that frankly does not believe in investing in education. And so at this point, what is the signal we plan to give that the money that they're calculating on needs to flow downhill? Because I do not think it is prudent to ask the community that is already, based on valuation, giving plenty, to ask for more. Rather, is it to push the state to release what has been given to them? And so what is it gonna take for us to tip the hand, right? I would agree, it would be egregious to hope it's gonna work, because clearly that's not working. But I don't think it is prudent to go say, please give me more, when we clearly see that the money is somewhere, it is just not here. Am I misinterpreting these graphs?
So I'd like to jump in to mention that there's an overall state funding issue as well that we have to be aware of, right? And so, frankly speaking, what these graphs say is that as a community, we can pay more. And not only that, but that we should be paying more and investing more within our schools. But I also want to keep in mind, this is why there's so much nervousness at the, I think, board and district level about the upcoming state aid numbers. Back in October, I believe the governor told all of the divisions of the state to cut their budgets by 5%. Right? This year, the state is running in a deficit, and their surplus is shrinking. In the next couple coming years, there will be several tax rebate and programs that are coming onto the books at the state level that will further increase that deficit. And so what I'm trying to say is the money is not anywhere. And we legally cannot, by law, have a budget in a deficit. We must have a balanced budget.
I'm sorry, and
The other point,
I'm going to piggyback.
sorry.
Yeah, let me just put a period to the end of Roger's statement. Yeah, legally I can't. It's my certificate. Love y'all, but no. It's my license on the line. But how do we change it? It's a law. It's the 2% law. I've been screaming for years at the state level. We've been capped at 2% since 2008. Anybody who goes to the grocery store knows that the cost of inflation is above 2%. I mean, at a minimum, they need to change that law so that the increase in our taxes is at least commensurate with like the cost of living adjustments that, we're paying our staff. I mean, for crying out loud, like there needs to be some method to the madness and it needs to make sense. Just picking an arbitrary 2% out of the air and then keeping it that way for a dozen years or more just doesn't seem to make sense. Statewide, yeah, it did great. It kind of leveled off, our rep in New Jersey for having high property taxes. Not that much, because we're still ranked pretty high. But it's just brought this problem on suburban school districts. So it's, having been around the block a couple times, there's two things. Change the law, and this is probably going to make it to the papers. Sue the state. I mean, the Abbott districts did it 30 years ago. I don't know what else to do because it seems to, when the lawsuits happened with the Abbott districts, which were the most urban districts that got a bulk of the state aid back in the early 2000s, suburban districts were fine, right? Because like our taxes weren't capped. So we could just ask what we needed for, and if it went down, it went to the borough, and the borough redlined a few things, and everybody was happy. And then we were capped at 4% and then 2%, and now you've got this. It went like this way. So now we can't keep up with the money and the spending at the urban districts because we just don't have it locally. So the pendulum has swung completely in the opposite direction. Again, in every child, it's just they need to fix how they look at how we pay for education. Really is what it is.
So I just wanted to ask something on behalf of, in case anybody in the public is wondering this, we just had a reassessment in town, and most of our taxes went up. I know mine went up considerably, and people that appealed, unless it's like a more than 15% difference, it's not going to make much of an impact on your taxes. So does that help us in any way, shape, or form?
No, because isn't it?
Yeah, no,
because it
that was
evened
factored
out.
into the calculation.
Because it evened
Yeah.
out. So
Yeah.
like people who had been overpaying taxes, their taxes went down. So,
Yeah, so that was a
yeah.
revenue neutral reassessment. Right.
sorry, just, the other point that I do want to make too is we are living in a reality where we haven't passed a facilities referendum in over a decade plus, 20 years. We have old buildings, those are costs that aren't going to go away. Like, we are going to have to deal with them, and as Roger said, I hope that we can make it until the point where the debt falls off, and we can make some of these that will be much more pressing in 4 or 5 years. Our neighboring districts passed referendums for considerable amounts while they were facing these same deficits, if not more. They were able to go to their communities and say, these are things that they need, these are what our kids need, these are the buildings and the opportunities, this is what it costs. I think we have to be very realistic about the fact that the costs are going up. If we want these things for our kids and these opportunities, then as a community, we need to come together to be able to pay for them.
Is there a way that we can address like the school alignment issue that we were kind of tossing around with the referendum and how that would sort of have a partial impact? Is there a way to revisit that piece of it in terms of keeping the buildings that we have and talking about, school alignment and moving into grade level schools?
So we could, but again, one of the big issues is that we don't have ADA compliant facilities. So once we start doing grade level schools with what we have, then what about the students who can't get into the buildings that we have? On top of that, that does not address the fact that we have 3 elementary schools which are over 100 years old. That risk still stays there.
I mean, it's the question, and I think the answer is, and I appreciate the clarification. So the money's not there. There's nowhere. Okay, got it. And in terms of our expense, at this point, is it even possible to think of consolidation to relieve the pressure of expense? Right, the sheer facility pressure, right? There is a pressure. It isn't insignificant. I frankly am not saying that I know where any of that would go, but is that even a possibility to make such a huge adjustment to help offset the expense? Because that is how extreme these, like, right, based what I'm understanding, to fill this gap, those are the kind of conversations this board will need to be having. Right, so I want to be really prudent. The first question, we first started out with, like, we went here and didn't do that. So, but now this board will have to reconcile. Do we go as far as trying to consolidate schools to relieve expenses to try to make this budget balanced?
The issue, as I see it, and I'll let Roger or Dr. Mott, it's space. Like, our elementaries are all tiny. So I would like to say, yeah, let's just, but they're itty bitty little elementary schools with small classes, so we're just maxed out on space. I mean, kids are getting OT and PT and all their services all over the place because we're just out of space. And some of the buildings have, the classrooms are like smaller than the normal classroom even. So I don't even know if we could place more children in there. So I was a kind of part of, like, when we were coming up with the bond referendum, that's like, we're just out of space at the elementary level. So I don't think that's a fix this time. I mean, we just don't have the swing space to put kids in. Just don't have it.
Some of the lawsuits happening at the state level currently, like Jackson School District, is over having to close schools and the money that they're losing out from the state. You look at, like, Toms Rivers and others, like, yeah, closing or consolidating schools, and they're facing gaps that, I mean, comparatively, we're feeling the same way, but are much, much bigger.
There was talk at the Fair Funding Collective about, especially from the assemblyman, about how the legislature has been floating more financial incentives to consolidate and regionalize. And that is geared specifically towards smaller districts, particularly like ours, and in Camden County. Many of our neighbors were really concerned about what that would look like in terms of home rule, where the schools would actually be. But many suspected that this would be in the future, that there will be actual financial incentives for districts to consolidate.
So let me provide some clarity on the regionalization conversation. And so it goes back to an original proposal launched by Steve Sweeney. They ran him out on a rail in terms of his reelection. And so what was the proposal that was on the books was a $1.1 billion overall cost savings for regionalization. School districts that were affected, so New Jersey in its home rule interpretation is oversubscribed in terms of school districts. And so just so that you understand the comparison, in terms of land mass and total student population, New Jersey is on par with Virginia and North Carolina. North Carolina has 125 school districts. Virginia has 132 school districts. New Jersey has 660 school districts, same number of kids. And so it's, the challenge is that there are some school districts in New Jersey that have no students. There are some school districts in New Jersey that have no buildings, but they all have boards, they all have superintendents, and they all have operational expenses, and they all have the ability to tax local citizenry. And so when we talk about, to our level of understanding of regionalization, school districts that qualify for regionalization are your K-3 school districts, your K-8 school districts. And so any school district that is not a K through 12 operating district are the districts that are in the discussion for regionalization, of which Collingswood would not qualify. You could say that we are circumventing the regionalization conversation because Collingswood by itself is a K-12 district, but in partnership with Oak Lynn, That's a degree of regionalization, and then also in partnership with Woodland, which is a K-8, is also regionalization. And so from a county's perspective, we're already regionalized. I think it's also important when we're talking about bandwidth and capacity. We have been oversubscribed or projected to be oversubscribed for the last, since 2018, 2019, all the way out through 2029, and that did not take into consideration preschool. And so what we have seen is that we have almost 200 students in preschool. We were oversubscribed in 2019 without using preschool numbers. And the reason why we have to rent space in order to provide preschool services at multiple locations, with our fourth rental property being opened in September, is because we're just out of space. And so we have been oversubscribed in elementary by almost 300 students for many, many years. There is a reason why they do not build schools the size of the ones that we have now, is because economically speaking, it's not efficient.
And that's all paid for by the preschool grant, right? All the renting of the buildings and all
Yes.
those costs included?
Yes.
I just want to ask another practical question. I know a few weeks ago we talked about scheduling and we talked about all these opportunities that the kids were going to have in terms of scheduling, and now here we are just a few weeks later talking about this massive budget crisis and potentially not offering those programs that we had said we were going to offer. How does that impact the staff and the counseling department that's actually doing the scheduling? Like, when are they going to know what their plan looks like in terms of being able to offer those courses and do all that work to get those students in those schedules, and then not have to worry about changing all that to put all that stress on them? So that might be a question for you, Mark.
Well, I'm actually going to answer that. The reality is we're unable to answer that right now. And I think it goes without saying is that the chaos coming from Washington, D.C. has introduced variables that no one anticipated. And so we currently receive a little over $5 million per year in federal funding. All of that is potentially at risk. That is not something that any of us on this dais, anyone in the crowd, anyone in this town could have anticipated. Also, the conversation that we've been trying to have is what the state constitutes a thorough and efficient education versus what those of us who have made the conscious decision to buy homes and move to Collingswood, raise our children here, myself included. I have a preschooler and a second grader. I live here too. I'm a taxpayer, I'm a parent. I have skin in the game. We all moved here for a reason, because we wanted robust services and offerings for our children. However, that is not what the state considers a thorough and efficient education. And so at the end of the day, graduation requirements take precedent. They rule the day. Making sure that student IEPs and appropriate academic services are delivered, those also take priority. When we talk about painful cuts, it's all of the things that are not technically required, and that is going to take a much longer conversation that has to include schools. And so we're not able to answer that question today, nor will we be able to answer it on Thursday until we go line by line, school by school, so that we can better understand what's the impact of said decisions after we find out what the dollar amounts that are coming in from the state, and hopefully no reductions to federal funding.
So I think my question is more towards what the parents might expect to know in terms of like what the scheduling process looks like. When does that process start versus when will we know the information that we have to provide to them?
So high school parents they're in the process, and so the high school they are going through course requests. Students are selecting what they desire, and the school process is unchanged. So we've not given the school any indication to change their process. We do believe that student voice should drive what is offered. And so we will try to the best of our ability to offer what kids are asking for.
So to move the conversation maybe a little bit forward, obviously advocacy at the state level is extremely important, and thank you so much for the work that you've been doing. But unfortunately, that's not going to be realized in time for our very serious deadlines that are coming up. So as you keep saying, Thursday the numbers come out, March 10th we have our budgetary meeting, and at that point there needs to be a number given to the county, correct? So considering that we had a very largely publicized meeting 2 weeks ago to give an ask to the borough. Where do we stand on that as of now? And what, I have seen obviously correspondence, but, where are we in making this happen? Because it sounds like the borough has been very vocal about being willing to collaborate. So what are we still waiting for? And when can all board members be involved in whatever this process is going to look like?
Yeah, so we're waiting on word from the borough and the commissioners on what they are willing to commit to additional funding for the schools.
Isn't there additional documentation that they're asking for? Where are we in that process?
Yeah, so the letters that I think you were talking about, which are published on the borough's website, the commissioners have asked for our working documents and many internal documents that are protected as internal documents, and some of them are also protected as confidential negotiations data documents. They're also asking for things like our classroom size counts, and our daily schedule for the schools. The thing is that those documents are not needed to understand at all the current situation. All of this information right here is all from public documentation. So one of the things that Dr. Seltz and I wrote back when was that, hey, look, these are internal documents that are protected documents for the district administration, and they are not needed to understand the situation, which is what part of what the commissioner said it was needed for.
I guess I just want to make sure I'm really clear. I think we can all agree that we don't need the borough to help us with school operations and budget planning, so we're trying to draw the line on what has to be is necessary and is publicly available. And in terms of next steps, we're waiting to hear around what is the response to the same information the state gets, the federal government gets. They're able to use it to help us understand funding, and we're still waiting for a response. And we know that our deadline is the 10th of March.
Correct.
So on February 7th, the first letter that went out, it was signed and it stated that, the BOE is eager to begin discussions with the borough about how we can partner to address the present financial reality. I'm a little confused on what level this could be considered a partnership. Our elected officials, including everybody here at this table, is responsible for communicating with our community, and the commissioners have a responsibility to ensure that our taxes are not increased without a thorough review or where our money is going. So simply giving the district $3 million is, it sets a pretty terrible precedent for our town, and we don't want to live in a town that drastically raises taxes with no accountability or transparency. So I have a couple of questions of why we're refusing to be transparent with our community, and I do understand that some of those documents are, deliberative process documents, and I would encourage us to maybe, wouldn't it be helpful to deliberate some of those line items together? So I am a little confused, and again, I think we kind of are gaslighting the community by saying that these documents are not necessary for the commissioners to determine what funding from the borough we're committing to the schools.
So I'd like to address.
Who is this final decision lay with? Because it isn't a conversation between all of us. So who is that final person that's saying, no, we won't release these? And also, can we release something
Me.
and redact?
Me.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
me.
So you're, okay, so we've
let
made
me
that
be
decision.
let me be very clear, because I think that we're conflating the issues. There are two executives in Collingswood. Two. There is the mayor and there is the superintendent. And so a degree of mutual respect and parity is important. And so the conversation around budget is not a new one. We've been having, quote unquote, pick up the phone and call me conversations for 4 years. And so let's not continue to tiptoe around the 800-pound gorilla or the elephant that's in the room. We've had these discussions informally for 4 years. This has been a problem for 10 years. In every other municipality in this region, superintendents, boards, mayors, boroughs, They all work collaboratively in order to make sure that the schools and the children and the families, they have what they need. It is a fact, not fiction. It is publicly available information, and we have 10+ years of information posted publicly on our website that 83% of the budget that the state believes that we should have is what we've been operating, when our neighbors are between 96 and 120% of what the state says. That's a fact. And so for us to continue to tiptoe around the issues, I think, is disingenuous, and respectfully, I think that in terms of the public information, we as a district have not disrespected any entity and say, show me your books. We don't believe that you are telling the truth, and we are asking for the same degree of respect.
I'd also like to jump in and mention that there's this, I think, conception that has been stated that the borough would be giving the district $3 million and just blind, that there's just no accountability at all for what that money is done for. No, the accountability structure is here. That money goes to the district. Collingswood votes for this board. That is the accountability structure for how the money the district spends is spent. So when we talk about conflating things, the borough, let's be very clear, the borough, the commissioners are not elected to administer the schools. So if we were to go line by line with administrators who aren't even school officials or school experts, to say, oh, you know what, this class size should be this, that class size should be this teacher should stay, this teacher should go. That doesn't make any sense. This is why even the Board of Education, we are not allowed to administer schools. We're here to oversee the schools, because the school professionals that we have, our superintendent, our business administrator, our director of curriculum, are the educational experts with decades of experience here to help administer schools. And so this is one of those things where I just want to peel back and say, I think there's this idea as if it's reasonable for us, for folks to say, our business office apparently isn't doing their job and they're not budgeting or finding the savings where they can be. And yet we have one of the best business administrators in the entire state. Over 34 years of public and private accounting experience. Right? A number of awards. Teaches for the New Jersey the School Business Administration organization. It is called by other business administrators in the area to ask for help on their budgets. Right? We have an assistant business administrator who has years of experience as a math teacher and has 7+ years as experience as a business administrator in different towns, including as a business administrator for Haddonfield. So when we're saying, hey, we need there should be some other folks that come in and look at the books. No, we have the local experience here. That is necessary to understand our local context and how to use our budget. And I think we need to be very clear that the schools administer schools. What we have asked of the borough and why we have come to the borough is because the borough, the commissioners, they govern the taxation model. And so we have come to ask them to use their governance there to assist the board. And so I want to be very clear there that there needs to be that distinction, and that is why our ask is what it is.
And I just want to be clear to make sure I understand this, Roger, that, our ask that we approved unanimously in our resolution doesn't necessarily say where we're asking the borough to come up with the $3 million, right? We're not necessarily saying it has to come through an increase in taxes, right? Because you were talking about a taxation model. we're not experts at all in taxation models or in allocation or anything like that, right? So it doesn't, we're just saying this is what we need. We're not saying exactly where it has to come from.
Right, and so the resolution itself does talk about increasing taxes, and that's because that's one of the places that we identified. There is capacity. Like, there is the stated ability to be able to increase taxes by $3 million to provide the district with $3 million of additional funding. However, as you said, you know, we know that we are not, and nor is anyone here in the district an expert in borough financing, right? And so if the borough is able to use their experts to go through their budget and to go through their allocations and to find out, hey, how can we provide this amount of funding without raising taxes or with a lower tax raise, then I am 100% confident that all of us here would appreciate that, and the entire town would appreciate that. So for sure, absolutely. It doesn't necessarily have to be tax raised, but that is something that the commissioners, I believe, are you know, hopefully deep in trying to figure out, and that is what we are waiting for from the commissioners, is their word on terms of what they are willing to provide and commit to our schools.
Can I just ask, go ahead. So a resolution that is asking, can you, within your current purview, I find 3 million, is, if that is not tenable, I guess I'm trying to make sure that I'm leaving this conversation clear that that perhaps, as proposed by another member of this board, that we would then go to the community with a referendum for that money if the borough was unable to, right? So I just want to make sure I'm understanding the conversation we are having here this evening. We have several of us who
Right.
Is the resolution in lieu of going for a referendum? And if we cannot get a response by what date, I think we would like better clarity on, we would then meet to determine what our next steps are.
So to be clear, there is, like, the commissioners are able to raise $3 million in taxes and provide them to the schools. I just want to be very clear, that is doable, all right? Now, in terms of, hey, if this funding is not provided to the district, what would happen? So, you know, on Thursday, the state comes out with their state aid numbers, and that will give us a little bit of indication into whether or not the Robbinsville scenario, which we've talked about before, aka doing a referendum to raise the operating budget for our district, is acceptable by the state, right? And if it is, I think you will see a rash of school districts across the state doing so, and the earliest time that we can do so would be September, right? Which means that currently, what our business office has to operate under is the current situation, which is that we are likely seeing, unless we see a miracle from the state, likely seeing a several $1 million budget gap that has to be closed. And so a referendum in September would not help that, and would lead to the cuts for next year. So one of the things that I really want to mention here is that beyond that, this is what we asked, essentially, is Robbinsville, right? It's just that it can give us this impact now. It doesn't circumvent any laws, and so we don't draw the ire of the Department of Education. And also, honestly, this also doesn't cost the district money of having to fund a special election for it.
I would just like to, and obviously, since that is the reality, that we are faced with this extremely close deadline, what I would like to ask again, because you're right, we did unanimously pass a resolution, and we all believed in that resolution, but I know I asked what kind of collaboration we're talking about, what kind of communication, will there be in-person meetings that everybody can take advantage of? So, you know, those affirmative answers coming from, those affirmative answers coming from you is definitely what led me to say, yes, this sounds like a good idea. So I am simply saying, and I'm not sure why any kind of questioning means any kind of casting any kind of disparaging commentary on Ms. Coleman or anything like that. That is certainly not what anybody's talking about. I'm simply saying that I think having more of a collaboration, if emails back and forth and we're waiting and the clock is ticking and we're very worried about, as you mentioned several weeks ago, this 5-alarm fire, could we perhaps have more of a maybe sit down, not to I mean, my impression isn't, okay, let's go over the books and see what you're doing wrong. It's, hey, let's go over and see what kind of cost-saving measures can we get into. I've heard shared services in transportation thrown around. So it seems like there are some ideas out there, and I am simply suggesting that perhaps some in-person meetings would be productive considering this deadline that is looming.
So I'd like to mention, so the cost savings question in terms of shared services, the transportation piece, I think, is a big piece that we've talked about, has been rising over the years, right? And I think we're projecting, over $1 million potentially next year in terms of that. So if we were to eliminate all of our transportation, we'd still have a massive gap. But even then, most of our transportation is through shared services, through the Camden County Educational Services, which already bids out on behalf of multiple school districts in order to get us the best possible price for transportation of our kids with special needs. And this transportation is very, very, it's very specific. Some of these students need nurses and so forth, right? And so one of the things that I want to say here is that, yeah, sure. I mean, if there are ideas, great. But in terms of economies of scale, understand that the district's budget is twice the size of the borough's. So in terms of economies of scale, we have the economies of scale here, and we have the educational professionals and the connections to get those shared services as best as possible. In July, part of the discussions with the commissioners about the referendum, we asked them to help us with transportation, right? And so if they would like to spin up a transportation company and help us with transporting not our kids with special needs, but say for athletics, then sure, right? But no proposal as such has been offered. What I'm curious about, Ms. Mikulski, is what talk, what meeting, what discussions, what is it that you would like to discuss with the commissioners that hasn't been discussed here or via the resolution or over the emails that we have sent and that are public and transparent for the community?
I'm going to interject. I think that the ask is that, right, we are all seeing there's communication. And the question, and I sit in a space of, to set up a meeting that everybody doesn't come to may not be fruitful, but how do we get a conversation in place and allow those who are able to join to join? And that's a next step that is maybe a one-sided olive branch of date, time, and show up, and that it is open for everyone in this board to participate is what I'm hearing. I think we are working to make sure as a board we all are speaking in one voice, that we are here for the best interest of our students and want to be able to have that conversation face to face. And that's the piece I will say in what I've seen. I have not seen that any message is let's meet, right? I haven't seen that. It's more of here's the list of things I need, and rather than yes, let's have a conversation. That is not what I'm seeing coming back to us. And so I think I want to just make sure that I'm really clear. If I've missed the memo, I cannot keep up with all of them between all of the roles that I have. But what I'm reading very clearly is we are giving, then it's not enough. We're giving, then it's not enough. And now I think we're asking, let's give one more good try and say, let's sit down and look at each other with the respect and dignity of humans to have a conversation for the betterment of the children in this community. And that's what I think I'm hearing that will help all of us move to the next step. I'm certainly not suggesting that we need to come with more than what we have, but let's offer to meet and call that what we've done. We can put on the record, we tried to sit at the table to have this conversation and then move forward.
And I also want to be very, very clear that in such a meeting, we cannot actually have the full board there unless it were a public meeting. And so that necessarily is one of the constraints. So when there's a question about, well, can we have the full board? We cannot unless it is a public meeting.
So I will defer my seat to my peers to go, because I
And I'm
trust
assuming the
you're gonna
borough would
repre-
be under the same restrictions, right?
Yeah, I'm not.
I don't
yeah,
know
I'm
what a
not really
quorum
quite-
is for
yeah,
them.
I'm not
There's
really
only
So
three of them,
people-
so.
I think we can appreciate, and let me modify, a quorum will be present, and those who are or are not in part of less than will be present, and allowing those to pick, right? Like those on finance committee probably need to step aside because we're in the weeds. So let's just offer that those who want to be in those conversations and it can help them move forward, can help us move them forward. So if you can, please, right? Like, I heard some people have his phone number and his phone. Please help us get everybody at the table. That is the ask.
Yep. And one of the things that I want to be very clear about is, in the end, we must close this budget gap, right? Or else there will be very real consequences that are very negative for our students. And one of the reason why we have this resolution is because the getting additional funding from the borough is, frankly, one of the only ways possible that we can right now to close that budget gap. All right, seeing as there is no other comments or discussion, I think I'll take a motion to close committee of the whole.
So moved.
And a second? All those in favor? Aye. All right. Moving on to section 5, future dates and miscellaneous information. So, let's see. Item 5.01 is important dates. I do want to mention a few things here because I think definitely a lot of community members will want to come and maybe make their voices be heard, especially because of the budgeting, I think, challenge that we're facing. So we have a special board meeting on March 10th, and that will be when we have to introduce and submit our preliminary budget for 2025-26 to the county executive superintendent for the next year. And then that budget will be fully passed later in April, but it will, that is the first step. And that has to be a balanced budget. And then I'll also mention that we have a board roundtable on March 13th. That's a Thursday. It's from 6:30 p.m. to 7:45 p.m. at the Collingswood Library Committee Room. And then we'll also have another board meeting at the end of the month on March 24th. Okay, so section 6, routine business. Item 6.01, approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the January 27th, 2025 regular board meeting, the February 1st, 2025 board retreat, and the February 10th, 2025 special meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor? Aye. Awesome. Okay, so now we are to section 7, the first section for public comments. Give me 1 second here. Okay. The purpose for this public comment section is to discuss items listed on the agenda. Additional, more general comments may be made later in the meeting. The public is reminded that attempts to resolve all concerns and complaints should first go through appropriate staff members and administrators. The intent of public comment is to give the community opportunity to provide feedback to the board. We will be actively listening and taking notes so that we can take all that is being said into consideration. If appropriate, clarifying comments may be made by the board president after a public comment or at the end of public comments. For more detailed responses to concerns, communication may go out later in the week by the appropriate staff members or administrators or be discussed by the board during future committee meetings. Members of the public are welcome to speak and expected to do so with the utmost sensitivity for everyone in attendance. In fairness to all who wish to speak, there's a strict 3-minute time limit per person during public comment, and Ms. Coleman will assist by keeping time. Please remember to state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Mr. Goldberg, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the district music teachers, Ms. Carlson, Mr. Gross, Mr. Hartung, Ms. Introcaso, and Ms. Ludwig, and myself. It is our mission to provide every student the opportunity to grow through a high-quality, ability-appropriate, universally accessible music education that inspires the continuing study of music. In March, the Collingswood Music Department is back in action. Both the high school and middle school choirs will be putting on their mid-year choral concerts. Afterwards, middle school choir will take their act over to Rowan University to compete in the NJMEA Choral Festival. Collingswood High School Band and Orchestra have big plans at Philadelphia's prestigious Kimmel Center for the Performing Arts. The band program then comes back home to serve our own community, performing at the Collingswood Manor. Fifth grade families can look forward to the side-by-side instrumental music workshop, where our more experienced students from the secondary program get to help our elementary schoolers more successfully transition to the middle school. Last but not least, come see this year's high school musical, Little Shop of Horrors. Tickets on sale now at collstheater.com, COLLSTHEATER.com. Third, fourth, and fifth graders get a sneak preview of the show as we take a field trip over to the auditorium the morning of opening night. Though these events are an important staple of any high-quality music program, much of the impact of music happens behind the scenes, in music class every day. Every day, students learn to work together to create something greater than themselves. They learn to encourage each other and motivate themselves towards a common goal. The skills learned in music class, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, are the skills students take with them to lead healthy and successful lives in any career. From kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade, music teaches students the best of what humanity has to offer and what it means to be the best human they can be. In general education classrooms, modernizing districts are pushing to incorporate social and emotional learning, or SEL, into the curriculum based on overwhelming research that proves SEL's profound impact. Well, music teachers have known this for decades, which is why the arts, the original SEL, continue to be a model for the many other aspects of schooling. Thank you for your time.
Rebecca Muller, 509 Dwight Avenue, and secondary MTSS coach under the Wellness Center Trauma Informed Care Grant. I want to start off in stating that I believe in public schools, and we need to start using the talent in the room, those who work behind the scenes to uplift our students. Instructional assistants, for example, are often underappreciated despite their qualifications. Many hold substitute certs and even master's degrees in other fields. Let's get creative and start to use the people we currently have. Take Sam Mosier. She stepped up to teach high school math class that had been without a teacher, walking into a disorganized classroom with no supplies and disengaged students who had seen a rotating door of substitutes. Through her dedication, she revitalized that classroom. Yet today, she once again only serves as an educational assistant. Evidence that we are underutilizing passionate and capable individuals. We must support those that care about our community and help to find ways to get them to become certified. Additionally, our Culture Climate Grant, which has been instrumental in fostering student relationships, is set to expire on February 28th. As a result, we stand to lose 3 key individuals who have made an incredible impact. Ms. Kelly has not only built connections with students, but has also provided them with essential resources: food, coats, hygiene, products, and most importantly, care. The people who do this critical work deserve some stability, and we need to find a way to ensure their continued presence in our schools. Furthermore, when we find a Spanish-speaking educator, we must retain them to support our diverse student body. Last year, we lost Shannon Capraro when the SEL position was cut. She played a crucial role in connecting families to the school and organizing community-building activities, such as this lovely inclusion poster that we continue to have. These roles are essential and not expendable. Here at Collingswood, our teachers have bleeding hearts. They work tirelessly to do right by the students, but we can't continue to put Band-Aids on a hemorrhaging wound. It's time to stop the bleeding. We must invest in retaining the people we currently have and ensure that they can thrive. This message is for our new board. I want to be a part of a district that is strong enough to weather the challenge, a place where I can confidently send my own children. Let's take the necessary steps so that we don't face the bigger challenges of tomorrow. We need to do this for the future of our children and the nation, and those depend on the choices we make today. Please continue to keep this in your hearts and minds. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Tan, your English teacher at the high school. And communication is built on trust. Okay, students trust me, I trust them. And when that trust is fractured, we have to do something to rebuild it. And I often tell students who make bad choices that the way we rebuild trust is that you have to be really open with me. Because if you betrayed my trust, I now have to see evidence that you're trying to change that. Whether it's intentional or not, this board has lost the trust of the community. Little things, like we had this wonderful presentation about the climate and culture team given tonight, and yet no one said that they're all going away on February 28th. That builds distrust, okay? We sat here 2 meetings ago, and there was misinformation on the slide about courses, and the only reason I knew that they were wrong, because they were the courses that I taught. And so I followed the chain of command. I went to my boss and I said, that's inaccurate. He said, I know, we have no intention of doing that. And yet the very next night, the same slide was shown at the public library. That erodes the trust between the board and the community. And that is why I think the borough, they don't want to micromanage you, but they're not sure about the information that you put on slides and that you say in presentations is correct. And that's my concern, that we're sitting here and we have a state obligation to provide thorough and effective education. But if we're not going to get that money from the borough, that all goes away. Okay? There's no way the school can survive losing the same amount of people we lost the last time we were $1 million short. We're all going to have to open our books, and we're all going to have to share everything if we want to all make it out the other side. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Tash Middle School. I'm also the CEA Early Career Members Chair. I have explained to you before that one of my responsibilities in that role is to help new staff feel welcomed when they come into our district. This has been a challenge because when new staff arrive, they're seeing more and more people leave. Since February of 2021, there have been 122 staff resignations. Staff retention needs to be a greater priority. Rebuilding trust and respect to our staff also needs to be a greater priority. This number will continue to grow if nothing changes. The balloons that you see tonight, those that survived staying inflated in the wind, are representing those members. We cannot lose more people, like Catherine Briggs, Claridad Cloud, Francis Garcia, Rachel Haynes, Claire McLaughlin, Natalie LeBoy, Bianca Coleman, Samantha Kofsky, Katie Morgans, Brian Dickerson, Rihanna Henderson, Felicia Easterling, Chanel Wilson, Amy Early, Kenny Chambers, Krista Riviello, Jonathan Yan, Joanne Rangione, Tara Zadalis, Dana Galagonia, Kim Ferrero, Jessica Benatti, Dave Walsh, Jen Hoffman, Andrea Hooks, Denise Clark, Asia Delval Frank, Christy English, Julia Gross, Shannon Kelly, Krista Logue, Krista Green, Tammy Anderson, Paris Stafford, Kelsey Diachillo, Erin McNeil, Kara May, Stephanie Riley, Roxanne Schmid, Frank Ward, Justin Kuttner, Faith Alexander, Andrea Del Rio, Wendy Heineken, Nicole Palillo, Jen Rosser, Charles Whitty, Colleen Whitty, Alexandra Zangi, Amy Shetler, Caitlin Daywalt, Ida Ortiz, Mark McKee, Megan Sharp, Dylan Kriske, Sarah Johnson, Laura Siervo, Sarah Mervine, Tracy Taylor, Andrea O'Hagan, Jen Carr, Sarah Dominiak, Kwame Ivory, Danielle Lang, Kelly Markey, Lauren Maury, Delmarie Andino, Christina Haydu, Michael Patchy, Miles Holland, Stephanie Tracy, Megan Dorney, Samantha Mazziotti, Wendy Lindsley, Kayla Calloway, Melissa Deegan, Wendy Lynch, Uriah McLean, Alyssa Mebbs, Matthew Remchuk, Kelly Gibbons, Jennifer Campbell, Christine Alston, Shaylin Trapp, Matthew Woods, Mario DeSantis. And since I know my time is coming to an end, I'm going to send the next 3 minutes behind me.
Good evening. My name is Eric Fieldman. I am an educator here at Collingswood High School. It's my 15th year. I'm also a 15-year member of the CEA. And as Ms. Tosh was talking about, one of the things that has made working here so wonderful the last 15 years, besides the students who we live and die for, but also our colleagues. Unfortunately, as you've seen in, say, in award shows, in memoriam, the list continues of colleagues we have lost over the last few years. And I apologize for any mispronunciations. Jessica Perez Hernandez, Donna Willis, Amy Wiltsey, Keith Higginbotham, Nima Hickson, Rachel Cairo, Michael Empkin, Lisa Pindavaris, Laura Badowski, Emily Briggs, Kelly Amato, Jenna Bruna, Matt Friedman, Lori Gratch, Peggy Jubb, Elizabeth LaBelle, Adam Marshall, Amanda Mason, Erin Valkowis, Rachel Whitecar, Erin Waller, Sam Zaborowski, Suzanne Henahan, Carl Lang, Michelle Cesaro, Shannon Huff, Pooja Sharo, Jason Snyder, Megan Walter, Megan O'Brien. And there's more. Brooke Dunn, Julia Cornelius, Kristen Alexi, Tara Moat, Alicia Perry, Blake Clivington, and please not forget staff members who were let go during the budget crisis. Megan Brogan, Madison Bryant, Jessica Stillage Kramer, Ruth Elias, Kristen Slosh, Justin Corderi, Jacqueline Perdido, Gabrielle Lynch, Alexis Bordana, Megan Switch, Scott Laughlin, Shannon Caparo, Rachel Cairo, Anthony Leonis, Erin Daly, Erica Jabowski, Matt Zadowski. This Collingswood has been the place you want to be. We urge you to make this, for our new members and our old members who are staying, once again, the place you want to be. Please, work with us. Thank you.
I want to take a moment to thank Ms. Tosh and Mr. Fieldman for their comments there, and again for highlighting how important it is for our community to invest in our schools so that we have the resources to continue to retain and also to provide the salaries that our teachers deserve.
Marion Nolan, 208 Park Avenue. I came to also bring up the word trust. The English teacher, I'm sorry, I forget her name, she speaks quite often about the same issue. It seems to come up every board meeting I've been at in the last couple months and every board meeting that I've watched on Zoom when I wasn't here. And now we're at the crisis point where we're asking for $3 million. I've read the correspondences between the borough and yourselves, and I understand when it comes to the specific documents that they're asking what your concerns are, but when we have been telling you for months that there is a lack of trust at some point that continues to build between the parents in this district, the students, the taxpayers in this district, and this board, and if we don't get this money, we see what's going to happen. Those numbers are going to increase. We're going to be reading more teachers' names that are resigning or let go. Give them the documents, please, so they can see just how desperately we need this money. Maybe there's specific things that are, like, need to be, you know, internal and kept for privacy reasons, and I understand that. But if that's what they're asking for, and you can sit with them and say, here's what you asked for, here's how we will use this money, I feel like that would go a long way. The other thing I've seen that your names are on all of the correspondences, and Ms. Mulkowski and Ms. Devine brought up the question that has been on my mind. You guys are all elected officials. You were all elected to bring a different voice to the board. If you're representing this whole town, how can we know that you are speaking for all of us when we only see your names? And now I know that the rest of the board was not involved in these meetings as far as how the discussions will go with the borough. And that's concerning, because we did vote for everyone on this board for different reasons, and we want everyone to bring the views of everyone in this district when we're asking for this money. The other thing is if we knew this was coming, why did we wait until the last minute to raise the taxes? This could have been done over the last few years. It wouldn't have seemed so detrimental, and maybe we would have taken it a little bit easier. Instead of asking for $3 million, we could have asked for maybe a little bit over time, and it wouldn't have been this large increase at the same time that we have our homes reassessed and taxes increase in that regard also. So if we're looking at this and we knew this was going to happen, that was a question that I had also. Why now? Why not sooner? Thank you.
Good evening, I'm John Rothwell. I live
Sorry, if you can, wait 1 second. So I want to address a few of the questions that were brought up just a second ago. First is that I believe the borough requested our detailed budgets on December 30th, 2024, and they were provided to them on January 2nd, 2025. The thing about these numbers is frankly, you don't have to trust me at all. This is from the state. You can go verify that if you want, right? These numbers are from the state. And so that is one of the, I think, the really important pieces for us to understand in terms of trust. All of these numbers are verified. Our budget office is audited every single year. We just went through what's called a QSAC, which is another Department of Education review of our processes that include our financial controls. Our budget has to go through the county superintendent. We can't just pass one willy-nilly, right? There are so many controls on our budgets that we have to go through. So that's one of the things that I want to make sure we're clear about. This is not just us doing whatever we want up here. There was a question, I think, also, so there are a few other questions. One is in terms of hearing voices from different folks. So in terms of the board structure, the board elects a president, and the president is the one who's able to speak on behalf of the board. And what I'm coming from is the resolution that we passed unanimously to ask the borough to raise revenue and provide it for our schools. There's also, I think, a question about, hey, why didn't we ask for this earlier? As Dr. McDowell said, there were discussions about the coming structural deficit for years now. But I will say, from my part, frankly, I did not know that there is this ability to raise taxes to help fill our budget gap until February, right? Because, back in October, right? I was reading the retrospect on October 11th, 2024. In the retrospect, I read, and they report that Mayor Maley said, we could give the district another $2 million, but it would exceed the cap we're allowed to raise taxes. We're not sitting on a pot of $2 million. The increase we could absolutely do, but the increase refers to you, not the borough. You would be taxed more, right? So there, when I read that, what I understood was that the borough actually couldn't raise that money, right? That's what I read from the retrospect, that the borough couldn't raise that money. And I did not realize until February 3rd, when the borough introduced their upcoming budget, that actually there is that bank cap space, right? So in many ways, yes, I personally want to apologize for not knowing earlier that there was that bank cap space that we could request to be added to our budget. But we know now, and we have the choice in front of us, which is either to invest in our schools and in our teachers, or we're going to have to face very difficult cuts.
Thank you, appreciate it. As Very nicely said. You know, I agree with that, but I also know what it feels like to be iced like a kicker, a field goal kicker in football, because, man, that stinks when you get iced, you know. They're out there trying to win the game, and they're put on hold for a second, so that was effective, man. That was great. Anyway, I come here with a different perspective, and if you could give me like a 1-minute heads up when the time is.
Sorry, could you give your name
John
and address?
Roswell, 200 Hampton Road, Haddon Township, 24-year teacher, Collingswood Middle School. Lifelong resident of Collingswood leading up to the point that I left in '01. We moved here in 1980. My parents moved here from Northern Virginia. I know members of the board. Some of them have slept at my house, and one of them graduated from high school with me. I love this community. I love the people in it. I love the teachers here. I want to support this board. Nobody is a bigger fan of our kids and our schools than this guy. I bleed blue and gold. I'm telling you right now, my parents moved here and stayed here. We were going to go to Ohio. Thank God we didn't. I can't even imagine. But I'm going to tell you right now, the reason they stayed is because of the schools. They stayed because of the sense of community. They stayed because they felt people really valued each other. I am not feeling that right now. I'm like shaking mad, people. We are not respected. You tell us you value us, but do you value us? When I have 11 Chromebooks broken into my classroom for 7 days, I broke down the math. 6 hours per Chromebook it took to fix that. My instruction was on hold for a week. So I know, like, I really appreciate this because I'm not a math guy. That made great sense, and it was a wonderful presentation. I'm telling you, it made perfect sense to me. But what we're failing to really grasp is the magnitude of the people that represents, the people that we're losing. And I'm sorry, maybe a lot of people don't know about the funding formula. I know that it's a bear. So I'm very curious if you could answer how they're going to justify infusing $3 million into our budget when that creates an equity issue throughout the state. I heard Abbott districts talked about. People that don't have the institutional history don't know. It's a hard formula to crack. So how are they doing it? I want them to. I love the idea that the contract will get settled. That would be fantastic. That would be wonderful. I'm not trying to discourage it. I'm just asking, how is that possible? I just don't get it. So I just call upon you, please be transparent. Please make sure you're trying to ingratiate yourself with the people that are trying to hand you $3 million. My God, how hard is it to show them numbers in the classroom? It's easy. What are we hiding? Cusack says it all. Put it in front of them. What are you doing? Can't figure it out. I just can't. And I'm tired of sitting quietly. I've given my life to this district. My parents are still here. That list of people that was read, I'm telling you right now, a number of them were kids that I taught, that came back, that wanted to give themselves to this district, and they've been chased out or forced out or disrespected to the point that they can't stay any longer. If you get a John Rothwell on that list, I'm telling you right now, it's getting close, and that's not a threat. I'm marketable, and in this day and age, teachers can market themselves because there aren't any. Get it together. Stop fighting everybody who's trying to come together to make our community work. We've got stabbings, we've got fights, we got all types of stuff. I'm sorry. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Roswell.
Marie Desi, 1124 Mansion Avenue, Haddon Township. I'm a staff member here. The one thing I want to reiterate is everyone keeps bringing up trust. I sit on a board of education, and the fact that you're going to meet with the commissioners and eliminate some of these people is shameful. It should be a public meeting. It should be a meeting where every one of these elected people have a voice. In my district, that doesn't happen. The meeting that you had, your retreat, should have been announced that it was a public meeting because you were all in attendance. And it's a shame because everyone here should have been there. You need to be transparent with the commissioners. I know that Cusack looked at your books, but you need to let them look at your books. You need to let them see what's happening in the district. You are asking them for a huge amount of money, and they deserve to see that. They need to see that to support what you are asking for. And it is shameful to try and exclude some of these people. And I ask you to change it to a public meeting so the commissioners can hear everyone. Even though you all voted unanimously, I'm sure that there was a lot of discussion behind the scenes that some people did not feel real comfortable making it a unanimous vote. but that's what's expected in front of the public, and I know that. So I'm sure some of these people had a lot more questions. Give them the chance to ask those questions and to talk with the commissioners. Thank you.
I'd like to be clear that the board retreat was advertised as a public meeting, as it must be. If it were not, I want to be clear. In terms of the board retreat, it was advertised, and this is one of the things where we have to follow the rules, right? And so statements like the board has not advertised properly meetings, when those statements are very clearly inaccurate, right? We have to be careful and be very accurate in our statements because the fact is we have rules that we have to follow, and they were followed in terms of what we had to do for the board retreat.
Hi, Robin Hogan, CEA President. So tonight I've heard a couple words used repeatedly: transparency and trust, and how there is a lack of it. And it's very discouraging, and the effects are felt in our schools, in our culture, in our climate, and how teachers are feeling and what is happening. So I really think the bottom line is we need to do whatever it is that we have to do to rebuild trust. Okay? So, and I went through and I saw the borough's website, and I looked at all the documents, and I read everything, and once again, I became very concerned about the lack of transparency and the lack of information that is shown and shared by the board. So, not everybody knows this, but I was asked to come into the office, and I was asked if I could meet with Mr. Chu and with Dr. McDowell, and the topic was going to be to talk about efforts to bring in more funding and to ask the CEA to provide its support for this effort, okay? So, and you asked the same of other bargaining units, not just the CEA, okay? So, and after consideration, I spoke in support at the February 4th meeting, okay? And I spoke in support of a partnership that haven't seen happen yet. And then I see correspondence where somehow it offends you that the CEA is copied on correspondence. I don't know why. What's the problem? We're part of the process. If this does not work, it is the CEA membership that is going to bear the brunt of what happens, and it's the students who are gonna pay the price. And yet you are offended that we're copied. Where's the partnership? Where's the trust? I just don't get it. You had an opportunity to build trust with the staff and with the community, but you didn't take it, okay? The board's response only deepens the CEA's lack of confidence in the leadership of this board during this financial crisis.
Mike Palucci, Vice President for the High School of the CEA, resident, parent in the district, taxpayer. A couple things here. First of all, last spring we had a lot of cuts of staff members. And even the board members that we feel as a CEA and as a staff haven't been the most supportive of us, knew enough to keep their mouth shut and just realize that people were hurting during that time. Mr. Chu, you were the only one that ran your mouth at the end of that and got defensive, and it wasn't directed at you. And this time, we're up here trying to solve this problem. You're talking about the shared combined experience of the people on the board. That doesn't even that pales in comparison to the experience of the people sitting in this room, the people that teach your kids every day, and the people that have left because of the way this district's been managed, all right? We are in this situation because of this school board, all right? The threats at the state level, the cuts at the state level are very much a real thing. They're absolutely a real thing. But you don't have the trust because of decisions that were made, because of backhanded and underhanded things that were said about people, because of promises that were made that were not kept. Right now, we are paying, as of October, $33,000 to rent room dividers at Good Shepherd. That's half the price, that's half the salary of a special ed teacher that we could have back in our elementary schools. We're supposed to take you seriously when those are the kind of decisions that are being made. It's like in Dumb and Dumber when he says, where they run out of money and he says, only get the essentials. And he comes out of the grocery store with a case of beer and a foam cowboy hat and a pinwheel. Like, this is serious stuff. These are people's livelihoods that we're talking about. Every time you extend our contracts, you fail to come to an agreement for our contract, you have to pay a lawyer, and that costs a lot of money. Combine that with the room dividers, we'd probably be through this already and have a contract. There's not space for pettiness. I don't know what the deal is. Is it to pad your resume, to say you did it? We have kids in this district, and we have teachers that want to work every day. Get serious. Does not matter what you can say you did. The referendum failed 2-1, and we need it. God damn it, we need critical capital repairs in this district. The ceiling tiles are falling out in my classroom. Get serious. I don't care if you don't like Maley. I don't care. I don't care about the proxy war. You support Maley, you don't support Maley, you don't like him. He's the mayor, and you have to work with him. This is terrible politics to ask for $3 million and then make a bunch of demands. I don't care who the mayor is. It doesn't matter. This has to end. You're complaining about 4-hour board meetings. They shouldn't be 4 hours. They should be 60 to 90 minutes like they always used to be. This is ridiculous. All of these people, the few that made it out, they have kids of their own, most of them. They want to get home. Like, this is absurd. It's absolutely absurd that we can't come to an agreement on this. Obviously, you don't respect the teaching staff and the support staff in this building, in this district, or you would have settled. If it was a priority, it would have been done.
Thank you, Mr. Palucci.
Okay? If it was a priority, it would have been done.
I'd like to address once more, as we have stated multiple times, that the board's negotiations committee has offered above average county raises. We are willing and eager to settle. We have also even asked to see if there would be a meeting. At this point, the next meeting is on April 3rd with the state's appointed public fact finder. That process will conclude with a public report that will include the recommendations of the fact finder for a settlement that will be public for the community to read. Seeing as there are no more public comments, I'm going to move on to the next section. Section 8, the superintendent's report.
So good evening again. Section 8.01 is the enrollment report. January 2024 enrollment was 2257. January of 2025 enrollment is 2233, and that report is attached. 8.02, 0.03, and 0.04 are the safety drill, suspension, and anti-bullying report. I just have a few comments for the public. And so first, just a public acknowledgement. This weekend, Collingswood School District hosted a pretty significant wrestling tournament. A verbal and physical altercation involving parents from St. John's V&E High School and West Deptford High School occurred in the stands at the District 25 Wrestling Tournament on Saturday, February 22nd. Collingswood Police and event staff, along with officers from Audubon, Haddon Township, and Oakland, responded to the incident. The gym was clear to spectators, and the tournament concluded with the final 4 matches. Fortunately, no Collingswood students or staff were involved in the incident, and the tournament was able to finish. Special thanks to our athletics department and our event staff for their leadership during an extremely tense situation. We are pleased to announce that on tonight's agenda, the Board of Education's commitment to supporting all students with the approval of core values. And so the core values state as such. As a Board of Education, we believe that the continued education of students, staff, and community to support inclusive excellence and social justice is an essential investment. Equity and inclusion are the fundamental elements of all decision-making and curricular development. Learning opportunities should incorporate and mirror the diversity of the 21st century so that students are prepared to participate in a global economy. The Collingswood Board of Education is dedicated to supporting practices that promote dignity and respect for all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, differing ability, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, family configuration, socioeconomic status, or immigration status. And that will be voted on later this evening. I commend the board for taking a public stance, and this is consistent with the core values that were already approved by our sister district, the Oak Glen Board of Education, previous to this meeting. You heard about the budget, and so I won't go back into that. All of the information that was shared this evening will be sent out, not only posted on the district website, but will be sent out to all families and all community members in our mailing lists. And so we just wanted to commend again all of the students who were celebrated this evening in response to Black History Month. Our schools honored Black History Month in a variety of meaningful and engaging ways throughout the month of February. And so Black History Month was embedded primarily in the arts and in writing. And so across the district, assemblies, read aloud, student research, and presentations helped to ensure that Black history was continually centered in our learning for this month. We'd also like to take the opportunity to thank all of our school PTAs for their support with these many activities. Your partnership is instrumental in being able to provide our students with diverse learning experiences. Academic support continues to be an area of focus through cycles of continuous improvement. And so for February, all of our schools are currently working on implementation of their Tier 1 interventions to support learning for all. Schools are reviewing data and actively making instructional adjustments to accelerate their student progress. And our schools are all identifying areas of academic growth and areas of high need that remain. We also wanted to announce that pre-K and pre-K through 5 conferences information will be coming out tomorrow. And so pre-K and elementary families will receive information regarding the upcoming conferences that are going to take place the week of March 17th. This is an important opportunity for families and school staff to come together to continue supporting student growth. Families will receive hard copies of their child's report card, their DIBELS reading report, and their winter math growth report. Conferences will be held in person with afternoon and evening time slots available. Please stay tuned. Our Collingswood Preschool Lottery has been live for almost a week now. The lottery opened on February 18th. And at this point, 85 district families have already applied and are excited about the opportunity to participate in the 25-26 preschool program. If you have an age-eligible preschooler, 3 or 4, for the 25-26 school year, we encourage you to visit the district's registration site to apply for our high-quality program. Applications will continue to be accepted until Tuesday, March 18th, so please do not wait. In addition, kindergarten registration is also underway. If your child is not currently enrolled in our preschool program and is age eligible for kindergarten during the 25-26 school year, we encourage you also to visit the district's registration website in order to enroll. We look forward to welcoming our community's youngest learners for the 25-26 school year and joining Collingswood families on their children's educational journey. Continuing with our focus to elevate student voice, we are announcing that there is an 8th grade dialogue event taking place. The Camden County School Boards Association is hosting this event on Wednesday, March 12th at Pennsauken High School. This event is a celebration of 8th grade students who inspire us all with their demonstrated exceptional character, determination, leadership, and community service. The honorees are people who confidently communicate and are actively involved in their school community. Collingswood Middle School student Isabel Ospina has been selected to participate. At the event, Isabel will be accompanied by her family and friends. We believe that Isabel will be an excellent representative of the Collingswood school community and look forward to hearing about her experience after she returns. A few quick winter sports updates. Winter track, we had 7 student athletes make it out of sectionals and are on their way to the state championships. James Cannon broke the pole vault record, school record this year. In wrestling, Collingswood High School, we are the Colonial Conference champions. We beat Paulsboro in their gym for the first time since 1967. Boys basketball, despite having a challenging sports season, we are pleased to announce that 20 of 27 players and managers are currently on the honor roll or higher. This constitutes a great academic season for our student athletes. In bowling, senior Max Hess had a season best high game of 266. Juniors Aubrey Gerard and Cole Brown improved their averages by 15 and 18 pins respectively. And Cole also logged a personal best of 190. Freshman Jackson Helms averaged a solid 126 throughout the season, having never bowled before. Freshman Isabella Consalvi had a personal best high game of 195. The girls' team won the first round of the playoffs, and while they didn't make it to the second round, they were recognized by judges within the conference of being the friendliest and most positive team in the league. Our swim team finished 7 and 5 this year with a win against Gloucester, and the team logged 260 time drops this season, significantly more than last year, with 4 students qualifying for sectionals. Girls basketball, there is a game tomorrow, and beginning on Thursday, the state tournament. We'd like to announce that Coach Nancy O'Neill will coach her final home game of her 33-year career tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Please come out to show your support for girls basketball and for the contributions of Coach O'Neill. Included in our community update that you'll be receiving shortly after this meeting will be a summary of direct feedback that came from our school community check-ins. And so in the month of December and January, we met with diverse groups of students at every school, and we met with available staff members at every school. We collected their feedback, and our school administrators are currently working on an action plan to address the feedback provided by students and staff, which will also be released in next month's meeting. But the summary of their feedback will be sent out publicly. So we'd also like to make an announcement around our Collingswood Public Schools Panther Pantry. So the mission of the school district's food pantry is to provide individual students and families of the Collingswood School District with supplemental nutritional support in a cheerful, welcoming, confidential, and non-judgmental manner. We support the mission through generous donations from Collingswood staff and community members like you. Effective this meeting and in all future meetings, you will be able to donate non-perishable food items and hygiene products either at your child's school, at the Collingswood Police Department, or at Board of Education meetings. A list of non-perishable and non-expired items will also be sent out to the community with any questions to be going out to our program lead, Ms. Niesner. We just wanted to also just say again to commend the student, Xander Stutzman, that was recognized earlier in our meeting for his dedication to scouting, leadership, and service to the community. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Section 9, student reports. There are no student reports today, so we'll move on to Section 10, Business Administrator Board Secretary report.
All right, this evening, 10.01 is a listing of your January 2025 monthly budget transfers. 10.02 is your Board Secretary's report, your financial statements and related cash flow statements. 10.03 is the student activities cash report. 10.04 is the NutriServe financial statement for the month of January. 10.05 is a listing of the purchase orders that have been issued during the month of February, and 10.06 is a listing of the warrants to be paid.
Section 11, Buildings, Grounds, and Finance Committee. Mr. Craig, the chairperson, will present.
Thank you. The Finance, Buildings, and Grounds Committee reviews all financial statements, purchase orders, and warrants on a monthly basis. Committee also reviews and approves all contracts with outside service providers and oversees all maintenance and capital improvement projects district-wide. Tonight, we're seeking approval on the following items. 11.2 to 11.9 is the Board Secretary's report as it was just presented. 11.10 is the tuition rates for next school year. 11.11 is a tuition contract with Camden City Board of Education for some homeless students. 11.12 is a transportation agreement with the state of New Jersey for transporting a student. 11.13 is the accepting the RFP response and selecting Remington and Vernick as the district engineer. 11.14, accepting year 4 for the building capacity grant funds. 11.15 and 11.16 are use of facility requests, one for a wrestling camp and the other for a private school to make use of our track. So seeking approval for items 11.2 to 11.16.
Is there a motion?
Can I ask a question? Is that, okay.
Motion,
yeah.
after the motion, yep. Is there a motion? Do you want to give a motion?
Motion, yes.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and then question?
I just have a question real quick, on a big line item for one of the warrants. And it's for, it looks like it's like aids and, subs and things like that, maybe?
Is that ESS?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that like, that can't be 1 month, right? Is that, no, really?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Very expensive,
Okay,
yes.
yeah, I saw that and I was like, that has to be like 6 months. Okay.
No,
thank
I
you.
wish. No, that's 1 month.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
And then can I, say one more thing about, because buildings around, we talked about the internet for the last couple of months, or couple weeks, sorry. I at least have to report from my own home that I have 3 kids that are telling me that the internet is back and really good. And so, thank you. So
Yeah, they took everything down one
hopefully
weekend
that's
and
like an
put everything
ongoing
back
thing
up.
And
Yeah.
everybody is experiencing that, but from my one little, pot of children, they said it's been wonderful. So, thank you. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to give that.
Any other questions or comments?
I do. I had a question about the recommendation for to set the tuition rates. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you set those rates? And because we owe money back now this year, can you expect maybe owing some money back next year with these rates, or how does that factor in?
Yeah, tuition is like another one of those areas. It's very wonky, but basically, when I start the budget process and the software is available, last year's audited expenses, I have to upload all that information to the DOE. So all that information is available as well as our enrollment. So in the software, it has a tuition calculation, right? So that calculation is our ceiling. And then, so that's the first thing we look at. The second thing is, again, after my audit's done, Trenton usually sends us a letter, and it's usually end of January, letting us know, like after they have our audited expenses, how much it actually cost us per pupil by grade level. And somewhere in the middle between what it actually cost us last year and that ceiling is like the sweet spot for tuition. It's not a fine art. We were getting really good. I was getting to within $100 per pupil. But the last few years, with us shifting so many of our expenses to ESSER, like our curriculum and stuff, it did have a dramatic impact on our cost per pupil. I don't agree with how Trenton comes up with it, but if you've known me long enough, you know I don't agree with a lot of what Trenton does. There's more than just your local budget that goes into the cost per pupil. We have a lot of grants, right? We have IDEA, we have Title I, so there's a lot of monies coming into this district from federal sources and other sources that contribute to the cost of what we're doing in the classroom. And so what they spit out to me is basically Fund 11. So it's not really a true cost per pupil, but that's kind of the handcuffs that I have to work within. So every year I kind of look, again, if my cost per pupil is less than what I charged, I have to give it back in the next year, which would be next year. If the opposite happens, then I get more money back, which is what happened last year. This year we had the trifecta, like last year I had more money, this year I have to give money back, and then our cost per pupil went down. So this is not a good year. I don't expect our cost per pupil to go up all that much next year either, because we did have so many cuts in 24, 25. But I am watching it very closely. And again, it's only as good as what you're spending, and you don't want to spend 100% of your budget. You want to retain some of that. So it's kind of like a fine, you kind of walk the line basically with tuition. So I hope that it's very confusing, and I apologize to Finance Committee because I kind of throw all of this at them, and they look at me, but it's like I think I had maybe 5 spreadsheets that all kind of come together into one massive mess, basically.
That's fine,
So-
thank you. I just thought the public it would be helpful to know since we said we were going to have to give money back this year.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. Yeah, it's nice that we generate tuition revenue, but if we don't, if we spend less, then yeah, I have to give it back to the town that sent the money, so.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Devine?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Z? Mr. Dilkus?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes. Moving on to section 12, the curriculum committee. Ms. Sherman, the chairperson, will present.
The Curriculum Committee oversees and approves district curriculum and assessment programs, as well as field trips, home instruction, co-curricular programs, and school calendar. Tonight seeking approval for the following items. 12.02 through 12.04 are field trips, including an elementary field trip, self-contained classroom going to see the middle school theater. 12.05 is Mr. Chu's favorite preschool Big Wow, the Voorhees. It's a free presentation by the Voorhees Animal Shelter to our pre-K program. 12.06 through 12.08 are out-of-district placements for medical reasons. Home instruction. And 12.09 is tuition free for students for per the CEA contract. This is for staff members' children to attend Collingswood High School. So seeking approval for 12.02 through 12.09.
Is there a motion? And a second?
Second.
Okay, questions or comments from board members? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Craig? Yes. Mrs. Devine?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Z?
Yes.
Mr. Dilkus?
Yes, except we're required to abstain.
Mr. Chu?
Yes. Moving on to section 13, personnel committee. Dr. Seltzer, chairperson, will present.
The Personnel Committee reviews all recommendations for teaching and staff employment, considers co-curricular employment, and considers all professional development opportunities for staff members. Tonight, I am seeking approval for the following items. 13.02 through 13.05 are retirements, and we thank these four people very much for their service to the district, long-standing service to the district. 13.06 through 13.08 are leaves, FMLA and JFLA medical. 13.09 and 13.10 are revised contracts and offering of a contract for buildings and grounds employees. 13.11, 13.12 are trainings. 13.11 is one for SHARP teachers, which is paid for through Title I funds. And 13.12 is a Handle with Care training for the pre-K staff, for several pre-K staff members. 13.13 is middle school PLC leader. 13.14 is the approval of a facilitator for the Building Capacity for Career Pathways grant. 13.15, 16, and 17 are athletic and non-athletic stipends. 13.18 is a student-teacher practicum placement for the elementary art teacher. A student will be with her. 13.19 similarly is a student internship agreement between Rowan and Collingswood Board of Education for unpaid internships from 2025 to 2028. 13.20 is a few new substitutes and tutors. 13.21 is the travel expense report. And there are two sets of trainings. Actually, one is a conference for Ms. Coleman and Mr. Burns to attend their professional conference, and the other is that pre-K training. So I am seeking approval for items 13.02 to 13.21.
So moved.
And a second? Are there questions or comments from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Devine?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Z? Mr. Dokes?
Yes, except we're required to abstain.
Mr. Chu?
Yes. Section 14, Culture, Climate, and Policy Committee. Ms. Maya, Chairperson, will present.
The Policy and Regulations Committee reviews all updates and changes of district policies and regulations. So tonight, up for our first read are two policies, the high school graduation policy 5460 and 5516, the use of electronic communication devices revised. The core values, I think we're going to revisit in the miscellaneous section, so that's in there. Okay. And then policies that are up for a second read were policies that we went over last month, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. 5512, policy 5533, student smoking, policy 7441, electronic surveillance in school buildings and on school grounds, policy 9320, cooperation with law enforcement agencies, and then the regulations that are up for review tonight for a first read are 5533, student smoking, policy 7441, electronic surveillance in school buildings, and 9320, cooperation with law enforcement agencies. So we are seeking approval for 1402 to 1404.
Do we have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Questions or comments from board members? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Devine?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Z?
Yes.
Mr. Dokes?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes. Section 15, miscellaneous. 15.01 is the HIB reports for the previous month. 15.02 is the 2024-25 Uniform State Memorandum of Agreement between the education and law enforcement officials. So this is the standard agreement that is signed yearly. 15.03 is the Board of Education core values document, which I'll speak about a little bit more in a second. So is there a motion to approve items 15.01 through 15.03?
So moved.
And a second. So just briefly, the core values piece, 15.03, that is the document that Dr. McDowell spoke about during his report. I want to also take a moment to thank the Oakland Board of Education for being so gracious as to share that with us. They passed this, I believe, last year after they worked through it, and I think it really does reflect very much so the shared commitment and core values that we have as a board alongside Oakland's board, and so it's nice to be able to follow, I think, Oakland's lead for once here, and so that's kind of my statement about that. Any other comments or questions from board members? Roll call, please.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Devine?
Yes.
Mrs. Maya?
Yes.
Mrs. Mikulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mrs. Z?
Yes.
Mr. Dokes?
Yes.
Mr. Chu?
Yes. Move on to section 16, our second section for public participation. So I'm not going to go through the entire statement, but basically this section is for more general comments. Doesn't have to be about the agenda. So last thing I'll say is, in fairness to all who wish to speak, there's a strict 3-minute time limit per person during public comment, and Ms. Coleman will assist by keeping time. Please remember to state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Smith. My address is 311 Lakeview. In July of 2020, I was asked by Brian Kulak, the principal of Tatum, to be a community liaison for the anti-racism work that was taking place in our district. That role morphed into the Collingswood DEI committee, and that led to me being asked to join an ad hoc committee that worked with the Board of Education and the superintendent on the referendum. Somehow, the referendum has turned into a dirty word that people have chosen to identify me online and in private conversations as the guy who worked on the referendum, the quote-unquote self-appointed leader of the DEI committee. They have also chosen to identify my wife as the wife of the guy in the referendum in the name of transparency online and in private. My involvement was never hidden, and I am proud. I am proud of the work that we did going into the referendum, a referendum that would have made our classes more diverse, more inclusive, and more equitable. The referendum went down 2-1. Yes, the town made a choice, and I will always continue to fight for the kids who I think need it the most. As will Al and Guido. That is short for Alexandra Nicole Guido, a 25-year educator who has spent the last 18 years as a reading specialist, fighting for services for her school kids who need it most. After a weekend of debating online, debating with an anonymous poster and a board member, the same board member who has chosen to disparage me online and in private conversations, Alexandra walked into her school to find out someone emailed her superintendent and principal to say she was bullying people online and that she should be teaching kids, and they cannot believe that she is an employee of the Bordentown School District. She does not need me to stick up for her, but the truth needs to be told. She doesn't talk about what she does, but she volunteers her time and has supported me and the DEI community work in this town. She is direct and she will advocate, and she doesn't think she is a martyr or a queen. She is like all the parents who choose to advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves, especially in this time and in this space and in this community where everyone seems to be advocating for themselves. There's always talk, a lot of talk about process, a lot of talk about intention. As a town, it is not enough to say that we are different, we should be different. It is not enough to say what you are for, you need to do the work. And if people who support you keep attacking people of color, and you are in the room when someone attacks people of color and you do nothing, it says more about you than the people who are using the words. In short, if you don't want people to think you or this town is racist, then stop attacking people of color. As James Baldwin said, in any case, it is not enough to be liberal. That is something that people have a great deal of difficulty with. It is not enough to be liberal, to have the right attitudes and to give money to the right causes. You need to know more than that, and you need to be prepared to risk more than that. Thank you.
Eli, can you help me out here? True statement there. Thank you, Eli. You're the best. Oh,
Had to make a scene.
I didn't. Okay. All right. Robin Hogan, CA President. Okay, so to be clear, I would like to talk about the fact-finding process, because this is what it looks like, okay? So April 3rd, we have a meeting with the fact finder, who's going to try to mediate a settlement, okay? If no settlement is reached, then they will set another date, probably 2 or 3 months off, okay, for a hearing, okay? At which point, we will present a binder, and the board's very expensive attorney will also be preparing documents and a binder, okay? After that hearing, the fact finder has 3 to 6 months to write a report, so there isn't going to be a report at the end of April. More staff are going to leave, looking for districts that first are stable, and second, value what they do, because it doesn't feel like this district does. So I want us to have a clear understanding of the fact-finding process. A lot of money invested in it, and effort that could probably just go into finding a settlement. Thank you.
All right, seeing as there are no more public comments, I'm going to move to section 17, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. And a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. All right, thank you and have a good night.